questions, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
All right, you guys are all good to go. And yes, that's my
Where are you coming from?
the
Speakers.
speakers down to
So
your right.
you didn't get to see it, but Oliver has a whole operating station behind that false wall right there. But because it was kind of a weird experience when he talks behind the wall, we had to pipe in his voice through here. So it's just this weird, like, Wizard of Oz kind of thing that's going on.
Fine.
But let's start with doing a deep breath together, and then we'll jump into the episode. So I'll just count us down. 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Unscripted Room. Tonight, our theme is parenting. And as a panel, our job is to explore how parenting has changed our lives. In what ways has becoming a parent taught us more about ourselves, taught us more about the way that we perceive the world, maybe even given us our vision for the way that we hope the world can change and evolve and be different. But I'm really excited to be here with the two of you. I'll do my best to hold down the father's perspective, but really excited to have two moms to be able to talk about what I think might be one of the most important things that can be talked about, which is the importance of parenting. So we'll get started by just jumping right into the first question and see where we go. I got to warn you two, these questions I think are the best 3 questions we've had all season, but we're going to jump right into the deep end with them. So
here we go.
It should be fun.
What has becoming a parent taught you about yourself?
Very big question.
Everything?
It's big.
You said everything.
Everything, right?
Who?
I mean, I feel like I didn't know myself until I became a parent.
Why? Like, why do you think that like, what was the transition that happened for you? And
I think it was just like a different perspective from a little person's eyes. And I think I see, I don't know, a lot about how I was raised, and I noticed things coming out of my mouth that, my parents said, and I can catch myself. And I don't know, they're just so, it's hard. It's a hard question.
it is. I'll say from my perspective, I feel like what my kids did for me was that they helped me break my narcissism. It was like the first time, because up until the point of having kids, I never thought of myself as being a particularly selfish person. I thought that I was generous to my friends and to my family, but you don't realize how often you're thinking about yourself and only yourself, and that you put yourself at the hierarchy of the decision making that you're making at any given point. And then your kids are born and you're like, oh shit, like I can't watch television anytime I want. I can't do, like, all of these things that seem like little micro choices all of a sudden get amplified because you realize that you are instantly working for something that's bigger than yourself. And it didn't happen right away. And I was quite young when my oldest son was born. I was 24. But I do believe that they were the beginning of me starting to make a choice to break my narcissism. And I obviously, and I don't know if that's something that you ever do throughout your entire life, but they were the start, I think.
I remember when my kids were pretty little and I was still, building my career, and it's just not really getting as caught up as some of my colleagues were with some of the drama that could come up at work. And it really was this grounding of, well, I don't have time to worry about that when I get home because I'm going to be mom and I'm going to be doing dishes and changing diapers or whatever it was. And so there was this, in terms of changing myself, I think kids teach you a lot about change. They teach you a lot about just not focusing. You use the word narcissism, but just letting go of all these other things because you have to deal with the immediate when you're dealing with a young family.
Yeah.
But I feel like I'm learning lessons as my kids are now older. There's like new lessons all the time. And that's kind of been a gift when you think about it, because who would we be? Like you said, who would we be without somebody to show us like the world through the eyes of a 2-year-old, or that we have to let go of them at every single stage that they grow, and all of these things that have just been, a growth lesson. So,
There's got to be something existential about it too, because it's the first time in any of our lives that we ever took on a relationship that will never end.
mm-hmm.
Pretty daunting.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't remember thinking about that when my kids were born. Like, I just remember like being sort of on this treadmill of things happening and being like trying to keep up with it as much as I can. But in the same way that, if you go through trauma, you get betrayed, you have, somebody breaks your heart, all of these things that are like fundamentally experiences that we all experience that you realize later on through reflection are some existential realization that that you kind of have to go through to mature in your life. Kids are they are the relationship that will, that lasts through everything, right?
Right.
Like and you never stop being a parent ever.
No. I mean, you're lucky, right? You're lucky if you get to be a parent and continue parenting throughout your life, I think, right? And that's up to us to like keep that relationship with our kids so that that parenting does continue.
Yeah.
I'm not very close with my parents.
Yeah.
And that's a major factor in how I raise my kids. Just do the opposite of everything.
It's funny. At one point, I had read that the generations after Gen X. I'm Gen X, so that the generations that came next, when we had the options for fertility and family planning, were the most wanted generation. So the kids that you've had probably, we really wanted to have these children when we wanted to have them. And they have very different relationships with their parents than we did. Because I don't think your experience is that.
I'm an elder millennial.
Okay.
Yeah, my parents are in their early 70s right now.
Yeah. And just there's a very different way that I think, my brother-in-law called it benevolent neglect, which I thought always really captured, I was still that generation. We were like running around at night and then, nobody knew where we were and we would just kind of show up when it was dinner time. And he said, yeah, they loved us, but it wasn't the kind of intense parenting that's happened since then. But they also didn't have kind of the same control over their family planning in the same way. So the kids that came later, have different relationships with their parents because there was just a different choice about having kids and when they came and that kind of thing that maybe impacted their relationships throughout. But
Yeah, my parents were really hands off. Actually, they saw I was a pretty good kid. They didn't have to worry about me, so they didn't.
Did you have siblings?
Pretty much, yeah. I was the middle.
Middle, yeah.
Yeah, my brother was 3 years younger and my sister was 5 years older. But I was the good kid that they didn't have to worry
The
about.
middle kid watches everything and learns.
That's hard though. You
It
know what I
is.
mean? Because you're no less a kid who needs foundational love. And yet it's very easy as a parent to assume generational order as something that you can play at your own pace and not realize that each one of your kids needs exactly the same amount of love and attention, just not the same kind of love and attention. You know what I mean? It's like this one thing that's become a theme in a lot of the conversations that we're having is how important it is for things to be familiar but never the same. Like how important that is for us as humans to have something that makes us feel like we can count on it, that there's consistency to it,
That's really important.
but that we don't get sucked into allowing that to be identity or personality. Because when you do that, then you start to think that everyone is one size fits all and everybody is one size fits one. Like that's kind of the revolution that I think we need to go through, is that there is no individual that is exactly like any other individual. And the very nature of that is what makes us all spectacular.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it makes parenting really easy.
But to your point, I kind of thought it was hard when I was going through this. My kids are a little bit older. My oldest is getting married in a month.
Oh,
Congratulations.
Yeah.
So how old are you?
Yeah, we should do that. Let's do this.
Yeah.
So my oldest is 27, and then my middle son is 23, and My daughter is 20, and so
Yeah.
she's the last coming out through college.
So
But
Kennedy is your middle son.
Kennedy's my
And
middle.
Kennedy came on the
Oh,
podcast. That's
cool.
how
That's so
we, yeah.
fun.
Yeah, he's the one that was, he observed a lot. But I remember thinking like, oh, okay, I am not going to overschedule my kids. I am going to we're going to do one sport and one thing at a time. And I was like so locked in, like this is how we're going to do it. And then I realized that my oldest son, who's very introverted, needed sports for socialization, but he also needed like alone time and things to do because he needed to
Regenerate,
go
yeah.
inside himself, and so he needed art and he needed piano, and then so I found myself adding things, and I'm like, I don't want to be overscheduled. But then at that time, I just started thinking, well, maybe I don't have, it's not going to be the same for each one of them because it's like you just said,
Yeah.
there's only each one has different needs and desires that we kind of have to pay attention to and let that be more dialogic, where they're kind of making us, we're reacting mutually to what their needs are. And so I couldn't just script it. And we probably overscheduled here and there.
But it is very complicated because there's not a clear roadmap,
No.
right? And the roadmap that you're given is given to you by your parents. So whatever your parents taught you about parenting, you kind of have these like two pendulum swings. You know what I mean? You can be like, I want to do everything exactly like my parents did,
Yeah.
or I want to do everything
Everything
exactly the
opposite.
opposite of
Yeah,
what my
yeah.
parents did. Depending on who your parents are, that could be a really good choice. Or it could mean that you have to kind of like find the middle ground in between those two places, which is really like who gives us guidance, who teaches
Yeah.
us these kinds of things. I mean, it's a little bit crazy that the most complicated job, certainly that I've ever had, is being a parent.
Mm-hmm.
And yet there's no training.
No.
None.
And we make fun of what there is. The
Yeah.
class where the kids bring the egg home and they have to take care of it. Like we make fun of that. Well, I should speak for myself, but my friends and I would joke a little bit about it. But really, that's probably the most important class.
Right. Or
How old are your children?
Oh, I have a 10-year-old girl.
Okay.
So she's going into 5th grade. And I have a 6-year-old boy. So he's going into 1st. So I got littles.
Yeah.
I'm in it.
yeah,
You're totally in it.
You're
Yeah.
totally in
And
it.
they are completely different.
Different.
Yeah.
But luckily they get along for the most part.
That's really big. That's also, I found that it was a massive gap as soon as everybody in the house was over 5. So you're kind of in it, but you're out of what I remember being the hardest phase, which is like some people are running all over the place and other people are like, you can't not be watching them or they're going to crack their head on a coffee table, So it's
Yeah.
like the amount of focus all the time. I remember
Yeah,
being
they're more
tired
independent now.
tired all the time when we had
Yeah.
kids that were under 5 and
What's the split again between Dashel and?
so my older son Dashel is 19 and my younger is 14.
Okay.
So Dashel's about to go to his sophomore year in college. My younger son is about to go to his freshman year in high school.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, my oldest was they were both freshmen, college freshman, high school, about that.
Yeah.
It's it feels huge when they're little, but
I mean, they still like
got
each other right now, right? So I know I had a little brother, right? So I know that, in a year or two, she's going to find him really annoying and not want him around. Like she'll still play with him and she'll still want to be around him and want to include him, but it's coming. I know it's coming.
One of the things that my mom told me growing up was, I'm not sure if she told me this exactly or like I learned it from her, but that in family dynamics, it's often that like if the kids have this tremendous respect for their parents, that it ends up oftentimes pitting the kids against each other so that they can fight for their parents' attention. But if both parents, like for whatever reason, if the parents if there is more relationship between the siblings because they're trying to fight against the parents, then that creates a dynamic for the kids. And so
It's just survival for us.
yeah, I think she was trying to explain to me that you want to try to be in the middle of those two places. You know what I mean? Where you want there to be parenting based on respect, but you don't want to get to the point where that respect gets so large that everybody is vying for it in difficult ways, and then and then the siblings don't figure out how to have a relationship.
Right.
And she was one of 9 in a large Irish
man.
family. And I think she understood more than anything, like, and
Competition.
her
Yeah.
parents were like they weren't, it was not a good situation, you know, like my grandfather was an alcoholic. My grandmother, I think there was probably multiple kids in their family that like were lost somewhere in the mix of all of this movement and what was happening. But she is you know, my mom passed about a year and a half ago, but thank you. But she was very close to her siblings, like extremely close to them. And that bonding that they had, I think, made them feel like they could overcome whatever they needed to by relying on each other, even if the parent structure wasn't as strong as they would have hoped it would be. So it's so interesting in
Yeah.
families how these small little dynamic changes all of a sudden have really long effects on the way that all of us um, have to operate in, you know, in the movement that we make in our life as we get older and transition.
I always tell them, I'm like, this is all you have is
Yeah.
each other. Like, we'll be dead and gone. They hate when I say that. We'll be dead and gone someday, and this is it. That's all you have.
Yeah.
We say that too.
Yeah.
This is the longest relationship you will have in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And my experience is not, I mean, my mother's father was the Irish alcoholic. I mean, lots of families have that. But there were 6 kids in my family, and I'm the oldest. And there's a lot of turbulence when we were younger, and parents split up right about my teen years. And we are really close. Like my best friends are my sisters, and
That's really lucky.
you know, that is a cool thing. My kids fought a lot when they were young, so when I hear you talk about that, I'm interested in that. They're very close now, and I love that that they've all become really close friends. But there was a lot of competition when they were young.
Yeah.
That, you know. So, do you have any magic sauce for that?
I think, I don't know, I think it's helpful that my daughter's the oldest. And she was always very nurturing to him. Like when he showed up, she's like, "Oh, this is my baby.
Yeah,
I will
I've heard
feed
that
him." Be like,
before.
"You are all the time. You're not the mother. You're not the mother." So I mean, she's always like made sure he's in line and everything. A little too much.
What a
sometimes.
blessing for you guys, though. I mean, that because you have no idea whether that's going to be the
But she
lottery.
can mother too much to him too, and
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and then he'll feel like that she's the boss, and she's not the boss, you know, and
Right.
Well, it is another component that we can talk about tonight, which is really interesting, which is the dynamic that we fall into with our siblings and
Yeah.
within our family of origin is oftentimes both our blessing and our curse as we become parents.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out how we don't equate exactly what we went through to be exactly what they're going to go through, but you only have your lived experience to be able to figure out how you're going to create the best
Right.
experience for them. So there's a lot that you have to sort out and not a lot of help or guidance to figure out exactly how to talk through that or figure that out, which hopefully is part of what we can try to do in this conversation tonight is just expose all the things that we were going through or thinking about and trying to figure out, if somebody was about to have, like we know somebody in our life who's about to have a baby. And these are the things that I try to talk to him about all the time. The first time he told me that this was happening, and I was the same age as him when my son was born. The first thing I said was, like, first of all, this is the best thing that's ever going to happen to you. Even if it doesn't feel like that every moment, that's okay. Like, accept that. That is part of the process. But what you don't realize you're going to have to go through right now is that you're going to have to mourn the death of your identity as a boy, and you're going to have to understand how to adopt your identity as a man, and they are not the same thing. You're about to take on a lifetime responsibility, and that is what being a man is understanding how to exercise that responsibility to the point where you feel fit. But if you don't exercise it, then you're not going to feel fit. And it's gonna, so you cannot continue to be a boy and think that you can live your life for yourself. That ends here.
Right.
And it was, I felt like I was seeing my own eyes and his eyes as, in some weird way. But I do think that that's part of the truth. I don't know what it is for women as you go through that transition, but I do think that that's as close as I could come to understanding why becoming a father is both exciting, but also fucking scary as shit. You know what I mean? It was terrifying to go through that process because I even had a father who I deeply admired, and I was excited to be a dad, but it doesn't feel, you know,
I don't know. I think I just did it. And what was hard, I think, was that so I've been married twice, but my first marriage, he expected me to have the answers. Like, I don't have the answers. This is new for me too, right?
Right.
Just because I'm the mom doesn't mean that I know all the
You don't
things.
have the playbook.
I don't have the playbook. It's not some secret that I'm
It
keeping.
didn't come with our anatomy.
Right.
one thing that I always wonder, tell me if this makes sense, but I always wish that somebody would have explained that if like 18 is a pivotal time in our kids' lives, right? It feels like for me, I didn't get the privilege of being able to make a connection with my sons while they were in, you know what I mean? There wasn't like a
Utero.
chemical.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there was the anticipation of it. There was trying to get myself ready. There was whatever that was, but it wasn't a chemical thing that I was going through. So when they were born, I remember feeling more afraid than I remember feeling like undoubtedly in love. You know what I mean? Like I knew that I had a responsibility and I knew that I was in love with this baby, but it wasn't like I was feeling this like overwhelming connection. And I had also had a lot of men in my life that were like, this is going to be the greatest moment of your life. This is like,
That's a lot
everything's
of
going to
pressure.
change. Everything's going to be crazy.
Yeah.
And then it happened to me and I was like, am I fucked up?
Am I
Is
broken?
something wrong with me?
Yeah, no, I
Because
think that's
I
wrong.
thought that I was a relatively healthy person, but now I'm like, am I a sociopath, a narcissist? Like what is going on here? But what I realized was that because we don't have that chemical experience of creating that bond with them, that I think our responsibility is to put in the time to build it. And I have found that at least in with my son so far, I felt like when my son turned 18, that was my opportunity to start talking to him like he was a man. And that was where I felt like I was the most effective and will continue to be the most effective for him in his life is as a guide, just trying to tell him how I've tried to do it and how he can be better than me. But it seems like for women, it's almost the opposite thing where the connection is so extremely strong in the beginning because biologically that baby relies on their mother to be able to survive. So for millions of years, this has been something that was ingrained in us for all of the obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But also I've seen at 18, that seems to be the point where you have to let go. Otherwise, it can also pull them into a gravity that is very difficult for kids to be able to figure out how to own their own life and their own perspective and their own direction that they're going. It's just nobody ever talks about this stuff. You know what I
No.
mean? So it's so difficult to figure out how do you plan for raising your kids with the understanding that just like anything else, you always do everything better when you're thinking about the outcome that you're trying to get to.
It's funny because I think I when you become a parent, whether you planned it or not, but I just don't remember thinking about 18. Like I'm thinking about 2, or I'm thinking about,
tomorrow.
I'm thinking about the crib. I'm thinking about,
Yeah.
just you're so kind of wrapped up in the moment. But I do remember moments when they were really little. I remember like really distinct moments, like when my oldest was 2. I remember walking in the hall holding him past his baby pictures. At that point you're like practically framing every month, and my youngest daughter would be like, Mom, you have no pictures from our time. But I just remember thinking like, oh, I miss when he was like so little like that, but I'm holding a small child. I'm holding a 2-year-old. And then I just felt like, oh, I'm going to miss every bit of this, like almost a mourning of every stage of it, of that experience. But you're in it so much too that I felt like I didn't have a lot of moments like that where I could just kind of go, there were a few. I've only got 9 more years before they're 18. What are we going to do with those 9 years to make this like the best childhood ever kind of thing? I mean, it's silly because most of the time I was just in the moment screwing it up. But there were moments when I thought about it.
Yeah, I think about it a lot because my son's 6, right? So he still like, I hope he doesn't watch this someday, but
I know.
he still runs upstairs in his underwear and like wants to snuggle in the morning and tell me things that I know it's slipping. I know it's going to slip away soon, like going into first grade. Kindergarten was already something, but going into first grade, that's something else. And, I'm trying to like be present and like notice a little bit more
Yeah.
right now because my daughter's 10. Like I feel like it happens so
It's going
quick.
so
Yeah.
fast.
He's the last
Questions
one.
for both of you about
Yeah.
that, and especially I'm interested in what your partner's experiences. But my husband would be very frustrated. Like, you need to get them out of bed. He's a pilot, so he was gone like half the week as they were growing up, and so they would, I have this big bed. I'm like, why would I have this 3-year-old sleeping in another room? Or so sometimes I'd have all 3 of them there, and I was always like, those. They're not going to be here in a few years. They're not going to want to crawl into my bed. They're not
Yeah.
going to be doing this as teenagers. And then he'd get home, and then we'd have to like push them back to their bedrooms, and he'd be like, I don't want them in the bed. And I just thought, does he not think about like, oh, they're not going to want to do this forever? And so do you think about that? And does your partner, your husband?
Yeah,
think about
my
that?
husband's Navy.
Is he Navy?
Not anymore, but he was.
My husband too. Okay. Yes. Okay. You don't
So
say anymore. No.
we don't want to break them. But no, neither of my kids like sleep in our bed or slept in our bed. It's more like in the morning,
Yeah.
on the weekend. And I do think it's good that they have their own space.
Yeah.
And
But do
and
you
that they
think he
can
has
fall
the
asleep.
same thoughts? Like, oh, they're growing up so fast. I was just
If I
wondering, 'cause
say
feel
it,
like my husband
he
didn't think about it as
notices
much as I did.
but I think we probably
Okay.
think about it more. I don't know. You tell me.
I think if I'm being as honest as I can about the perspective, it's like I did have thoughts that this is a good way to be able to nourish love and comfort with the kids, but mostly it's like, can we have sex every once in a while? Do the kids
Oh,
have to
sorry.
be in
Sure,
the
that
bed?
was 100% what my husband was thinking.
Yeah, like we got to figure out how to have boundaries so that we
Yeah.
understand where we don't give
Sure.
up our relationship. And yeah, but I was also 24, 25, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like in my,
Yeah,
so if
yeah.
I went through that again now, I might have a completely different perspective
Probably,
on
yeah.
the way that I would think about what my long-term goals are versus my short-term goals. But I think when you're a young man, especially, you really are very concentrating on your short-term goals,
Yeah.
but that's a tricky one because again, I don't know if that's a one-size-fits-all thing too, you know what I mean? Like there might be kids who need to come and get into bed with their parents and that is going to be central to their ability to allow their nervous system to be
Yeah.
able to come
Secure
into
attachment
its
and-
security. And then there are other kids who are, not doing that. I will say for your 6-year-old son, the one good thing is that 6 is also the beginning of when they become smelly and gross. And so your desire to not have like underwear that has not been changed for 3 days and
Yeah, I'm
socks
still
that
a
have
little
been
bit
worn
in
for
control of
5
that.
days. And you're like, okay, not in our bed is fine, a little bit more because this is getting grosser and grosser. I don't know, like the interesting thing about parenting is that it's evolving all the time.
All the
in
time.
real time. You know what I mean? It's like even while we're sitting in here tonight, there could be something happening at a birthday party. There could be something happening in your kids' lives. There could be,
Yeah.
my oldest son is working at a summer camp, a sleepover summer camp right now. And I get text messages from him on the regular of like, kids who are coming to him with issues that they're dealing with at home. And he's trying to figure out how to be the adult in the room and
Yeah,
help
he's the
these
parent all of a
guys.
sudden.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a real bonding experience for us to be able to sit down a couple weeks ago, without giving away any information that would be sacred to him. But like we sat down and he had dealt with somebody who was dealing with something that was intense for me to try to figure out how to, and I do this all day, every day, and it was really interesting. And all I kept saying to him is like, all any of us can do is listen and make sure that you listen with intention of love.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Everything else, but what we can't do on the other side is be the solution. They are the solution.
Yeah.
All solutions are born from the person who has the problem. All we can do is be containers for them to be able to have somebody who can feed something back to them that maybe gives them the insight to be able to become aware of that.
Yeah. So wise. I think that's one of the harder things I think about parenting is just that they're always evolving, yes, but also the world is evolving. And so some of the scripts I don't know, I pulled the word script as I'm looking at script, but some of the scripts we might have taken from our parents that we wanted to have don't apply because they're just not dealing with the same kind of things. And, the elephant in the room, social media and all those,
Podcast.
Yeah. And, honestly, as I'm bringing up kids, this is all really new. So I feel like maybe there's a little bit more knowledge and guidance that's coming out now with all the studies that are confirming what we already knew was happening. You know, people are disconnecting, and it wasn't good for little girls to see all their friends at a party that they're not at, and all those other things that we kind of know instinctively. But that changing world is hard to navigate because we don't have a playbook for that either.
Well,
you
could
know?
I point out one thing
Yeah.
that has been really impactful, because this has come up on the podcast and other themes that we've talked about, but which is that all three of us, we all grew up, we had an analog childhood,
Yeah.
right? Like we were exposed to television, and some of us were exposed to television more than others. And we could even talk about how television affected us very deeply. You know, like if you were home all day and you had a television on
Yeah.
all the time, those were completely different households than, you know, where television was very restricted if
Yes.
you went to those places.
Yep.
And the way that people got their, I mean, a lot of people that I grew up with, I felt like they were kind of raised by the shows that they were watching in some ways, if their parents were in any way absent from course correcting on a regular basis. But now we're raising our kids in a completely digital world,
Yeah.
right? And it's like we've got to figure out together collectively as a team what's in the best interest of these young people as far as being able to find their analog self. Like how do they come in touch with their analog self? Because we're not going to be able to get rid of digital. Digital is like just in the same way that like if people are concerned that cars are causing too much pollution, they're not riding a horse to work,
No.
right? So they're still getting into their car and they're traveling because that's the obvious technology that you use if you have to move from one place to another as quickly as you can. Technology has allowed us to evolve in all of these amazing ways, but we are experimenting with our children in ways that we should really slow down and decide, is this in their best interest? And we're also experimenting with ourselves at the same time, and we're not breaking the addiction.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so my kids are in elementary school, and my son came home and he's like, I love Bob Ross. I was like, what are you even talking about? And they have a screen playing in the lunchroom while the kids eat lunch.
You.
There's no sound, but there's a screen and there's something on it.
How do you feel about that?
I don't like it at all. I don't see a
get it
purpose.
enough,
Like,
right?
why? They should be talking to each other.
Right. Yeah.
Why do
some of
they
these
need to have
policies where
something
they're
like
taking
going?
their phones away while they're in school, and they're giving them back over lunch. And I've heard some commentators
Oh,
say,
wow.
no, they need to keep them they need to be talking at lunch to their friends. That's the skill that they're missing out on. So, I mean,
Yeah. And they use it in like music class. They use it in all the classrooms.
and that became really hard from like a disciplinary standpoint when we were like, we
Right.
wanted, too much phone time, or we were going to take, and we waited.
Yeah,
we
we're
were
not
like,
phone
we were the
squirrels,
last
so
ones in our
lucky us.
classes to get phones. Our kids,
Yeah.
woe is them. They complained that they did not get phones, but we really tried to hold out as long as possible. But once that happened, it was really hard to monitor, to be able to take or to set standards around that. Oh, I need that for homework, or this, I have to check this. And especially as they got older in school, which is coming right around the corner for
Yeah.
you, there's so much. So learning how to navigate that is like, we need partners with the schools to do that, because that was really difficult, and I think remains difficult.
We've had teachers that have come on to the podcast, and they all are kind of saying the same thing. Like they also want that, and yet the system makes no room for it. You know what I mean? There just isn't any room in the way that we've chosen to try to set up school, because school is a one size fits all.
Yeah, it is.
And this is not a one size fits all problem. This is a one size fits one problem. So we're gonna have to get creative about not getting stuck in doing things the way that we've been doing it, expecting a different result.
Right.
Right? Like we all fundamentally understand that is crazy, and yet that is exactly what we're all experiencing together. One of the things that dawned on me as I watched my kids go through these ages, and I got to say, for me personally, I don't feel like I did a particularly good job of preventing them from cell phones.
I didn't do a good job. We just tried to hold out as long as we could.
I didn't mean it as a
No,
comparison
no,
thing, but I
know,
just
I
want
know.
to own this myself. But partially was because I was divorced from their mom
Yeah.
at a relatively young age. And so when they're in multiple households, there's a feeling like having a cell phone is a connection point.
Absolutely.
And I fell into that in a way that I wish that I hadn't. If I could go back, I would have been like, no, the best thing for their mind is to be completely present where they are, and then to be completely present where they are. But this idea that they need some sort of digital gap between those two places is unnecessary. They can use my phone, they can use her phone, we can connect, like we can be mature about the way that this happens. But the giving the kids the phone, what I noticed was the real issue was like the three of us can probably all remember what it was like when we got our license. You know, that first time that you actually get your license and you get into a vehicle and you're like, nobody can tell me where to go.
I can play whatever music I want.
I can play any music I want. I can go eat at whatever restaurant I want. I can go pick up anybody I want. When I leave this driveway, nobody knows where I'm going and what I'm doing. And we even did that in a generation where there weren't cell phones. So nobody even had the expectation that they could track you as you were going from one place to another, which is a whole nother topic we could talk about.
Yeah, we should talk about that.
But I think what we did is that when we mistakenly didn't recognize that when we gave our kids their cell phone, we gave them a digital freedom that was the equivalency of the freedom that we had when we got our license. It was like we opened up the entire
The
world
road.
to them. And we just, I mean, you haven't gone through it yet, so hopefully maybe this is contextually
it's
interesting
a constant
to you.
fight.
Yeah.
Because she's 10 and there's 10-year-olds that she knows that has them. And
Well,
I'm
and
always
today,
like, you have to wait.
even if you don't have a cell phone, it's very difficult to
Or
find a kid who
iPads
doesn't have an
or-
iPad.
Yeah.
And if the iPad is connected to the internet, then we're basically talking about the same thing as a cell phone, right? Because it's
Access.
it's access to the internet. And I also found myself, because I'm not somebody, I've never played games. I'm not really like a huge digital person. So
That's funny.
I know. So I feel like I'm at a massive disadvantage in even understanding how to protect my kids because they know more about how to use the internet than I do. So I'm, there's just a lot that goes into this that's very tricky to figure out. What have we learned that we can start to apply to the way that we create some fundamentals to this? It doesn't seem like abstinence is the only way that we're going to be able to get through this. Like technology is going to exist. Our kids are going to experience technology. But how do we get them to meet their analog self?
It is helpful. I mean, if I did it over again, if I were where you were at, I'd be thinking about the friend group. I'd want to have talks with the moms and the dads.
Yeah, if you
Because
know
I
who
think-
their friends are.
Yeah,
Right?
Well, you're right. But the reason why
Yeah.
is I think it was really, really hard to have a rule in our house that everybody else. But I somehow I have the impression that other parents were struggling with the same thing. And if we had talked about it and said, what are some of the boundaries you're setting around cell phones or whatever? Not that we have to mimic each other, but to create more of a community, like, no, we've decided this isn't great for our daughters to, so that would have been a little helpful. I know that's, not the answer, but
So in
it's
Ames-
another part of the community piece.
I think this kind of conversation might be able to pull that off. But if it was we do this, you do that.
Yeah, not
then,
regulation.
Yeah, because
but just
So in the school system that they're in right now, they're really pushing wait till 8th.
that's ours were.
And that's
in high school.
the principals pushing it. All the schools are pushing
They
it.
have a slogan.
Whether it's going to happen or not, I don't know. But I'm like, wait till 8th. Like,
But
it's
that
something
would-
I can
that
stand
is
on
the
at
tool
least.
that would help parents if there's. But you're right. Like it's still the wild wild west.
Yeah.
If they get on somebody else's iPad or they,
Yeah.
there's other conversations that you have to have that are
I actually
not about
just had this
regulation.
conversation with my daughter last week because somebody shared something inappropriate with her at camp last week, and it was inappropriate. And we got to have the conversation, and she told me, which I must be doing something right,
Absolutely.
right? But we had the conversation of you can't unsee things.
Yeah.
It's kind of
And I wish that I had that conversation before, but now as I look in the future, I know that I can have that conversation, or my husband or both of us can have that conversation with my son,
Yeah.
and maybe it'll still happen, but then in the back of their head, maybe our voice will be there. You can't unsee it.
Yeah.
Well, your husbands probably both have a very interesting perspective on this because the military is so disciplined. You know what I mean? That it creates a mind that can operate off of discipline at a higher level than most people can and do in normal life. But we do have a challenge with the way that we raise our kids in that if we don't allow them to be able to see things that they can't unsee, then they might not understand how to interpret that when they become older and they see those things are what the world really is. That the world isn't what we create at our home.
Right.
The world is the culmination of what all homes are creating, and which is why we have to see each other as brothers and sisters, not as like my home, your home, right and wrong. But for whatever reason, it's so deeply ingrained in us to be righteous. You know, like for all of us, every single one of us, to a person, and maybe it's because we've been in authority systems our whole life. Maybe it's because it's biologically bound to the way that we feel about ourselves. But we so deeply want to be right.
Yeah.
And the problem with being right is that the only way that you can be right is to find someone else to be wrong. Right doesn't exist without someone else to be your counterbalance. And so it is.
Comparison.
It's an incredibly difficult thing, but this like, how do we make sure that we keep the innocence that is so important about being a child? And yet we also allow enough exposure with conversation to be able to make sure that they're ready to go face the world as it is, not as we wish it would be.
Right.
Because the world, I would say even myself, I grew up in a household where I don't know if I was like overly protected because we were out in the woods all the time, like hanging out with other kids. We obviously knew what bullying was. We knew, but in my home, I wasn't ever seeing anything that looked like domestic violence. I was never seeing anything that looked like physical abuse to me or my siblings. I never saw anything that made me like, ugh. So I kind of thought the whole world was like that. And then I went out into the world with a relatively innocent, and holy shit, did I realize the hard way that like that is not the household that everybody grew up in. And some people have had households that were really rough. And even if they're lovely people, they've inherited some real shit patterns that make them want to enforce those patterns on other people so that they feel like they can level set that pain.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's what our kids are actually going out into the world and going to have to face. They have to figure out how to prepare themselves.
That resilience that you that's part of your.
Well, resilience, but also like not every home is the same.
Yeah.
And if you grew up in a home where you were lucky enough to grow up in a soft environment, then you got to learn how to get hard. And if you grew up in a hard environment, you got to learn how to get soft. Otherwise, you're going to take that hardness and you're going to spread it everywhere to everyone. And so we've got to find that intersection where it's like, no matter how you grew up, that's in the past. You can't do anything about it now, but you can do something about the way that you start to understand your past to be able to become predictive of what are the patterns that you're going to have to break to go into a successful future version of you.
I think like my oldest son was kind of he used to watch, I'll put it this way. My oldest son will still watch movies with us. And my younger two became habitually they'd watch in their own room. Even to this day, I'll say like, both of them will usually want to just go do their own thing.
Same thing in my house.
Yeah. And I think, so this is more of a question, but I think it's somewhere in this answer of like the unseen part. I know that, some of the, research on media was that if you're watching violence, that doesn't determine your child's going to be violent, but it does create an opportunity. And that the big thing was the opportunity to have a discussion about it. If you're watching something sexual on TV, it's not that they saw sex; it's that you have an opportunity to talk about that and relate it to your values or whatever it is that maybe it's a time to teach about respect or whatever. And that's lost if everybody's in their own room. And I don't know how to create that kind of social, again, community that we have to live with technology, but how do we create the community to allow it to coexist? And that's the question that I have that I think, parents have to wrestle with, because we're losing opportunities to really see what they're seeing and talk about what they're experiencing unless we've done it some other way till we know they're going to come to us. So bravo to you for doing that.
Well, I think I'm lucky in that way. When we first started, I said I learned everything from them. Is my daughter is extremely curious, which
what a gift
is a gift, and it's also really hard, right?
Because
you have to answer hard questions all the time.
It's also hard to
do tell her the
for
truth
that same reason.
I do tell her the truth, and I'm like, breathe, Crystal, and then I answer, and I'm like, how do I say? Because I don't want to screw it up, right? But my parents were always like, nothing to see here. Everything's fine. Like,
Do as I say, not
and
as
I'm
I
like,
do.
what? Like, I knew that everything wasn't fine, but they're saying it's fine, right?
Yeah.
So opposite, right? Pendulum. I answer her questions even when they're really hard. And she asks and asks, and she loves to ask questions right at bedtime. She's so smart.
Yeah.
And I'm
Gotcha.
like, oh, I have to answer this because it's really important, and also you need to go to bed, but also this is really important conversation. But it does, media and things like that, what's happening on the news,
Mm,
things that her friends talk about, terms that she's never heard before that I have
so
to
great.
explain. These last 2 years from like 9 to 10, she's almost 11, like it's
That's
getting hard.
it is a gift though. Like that
Yeah,
she's
I mean,
asking you,
she's
building that
asking me,
habit.
like,
Yeah.
thank goodness she's not asking her friends because she tells
Right.
me what her
Yeah,
friends
you get to
say.
shape that.
And I'm also like, it's not your job to tell them what we talk about. That's their parents need to talk to them about certain things, but we can talk about things together too.
The first question was like, what did our kids teach us? I definitely think that one of the things that my kids taught me is that the truth works. And it works
Yes.
100%
They're
of the time.
confident when they hear it.
100% of the time, if they ask you a question, the best result that you can get for your kids is to tell them the truth.
Yeah.
100% of
Yeah.
the time.
I mean, age appropriate, but like,
Yeah.
in terms that they can understand.
Compassionately,
Yeah.
right? Exactly. So, but even at that, I would argue that you're way better off telling them a truth that is above their head than it is telling them the truth in a way that is below their conscious awareness.
Well, I don't want them to be fearful of the world, right? So I want her to continue to be curious and not afraid. So that's what I mean when I say careful how I explain it, where I wouldn't explain it the same way if my son asked me that question, right?
Well, it also makes us reinterpret the way that we might be afraid of the world. And then if we are, it makes us have to think ahead of our kids to make sure that we are thinking about what could be our coherent version of hope in a world that feels. I stopped watching the news probably 2 or 3 years before COVID. So I don't know how many years that makes it now, but it's like coming up on a decade. It was one of the best decisions I've ever made in my entire life. I don't know if my kids watch the news like when they're not around me. It's entirely possible that they do, but I know when they're around me, I feel like my vibration is much, much lower. My sense of calm is much, much lower. And no matter what, at least they get to come in contact with that sometimes. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah, that's good for you because that's a hard one for me. But yeah, but absolutely.
Well, I tried to follow a logical path, right? Which was like, okay, I'm a person who cares about the world, but I also, the more that I researched, figured out that there is a real thing called caring capacity, and that even the most empathetic of us, on average, we tap out at about 150 people who we can genuinely care about. And the most empathetic people in the world, it's not like they're at 8 billion.
Right.
Right. So on any given day, if I have this well of empathy that I can access, then I've got to figure out who can I have the greatest effect on with that. And it dawned on me that the number one and number two is my kids. And then beyond that, it would be my family. And then beyond that, it would be anybody who I work with on a regular basis and see all the time. And then it would be people who are in the school system or in the community or in that. But can I do anything to actually affect someone on the other side of the world with my empathy? And the answer is that no, I don't have that amount of influence. I'm not someone of enough influence to make that big of a difference. And so I need to figure out what I can do within my sphere of influence to be as effective as I can. And that significantly helped me try to create a worldview that was both realistic for my kids, but also not scary beyond what we could do that day. Like what could we control today? What can we control tomorrow? What can we try to build together that gives us some sense that we are going to build the world that we envision, not that we are going to go along with something. I was saying to you before we came on too, I'm also having I think I'm having an existential crisis over the last, maybe even since I started this podcast, that I'm starting to realize that the amount of propaganda that I have been consuming my entire life, even outside of the news. And it seems like everything that they have been telling us for our entire lives is probably not true. We got to figure out how to talk to our kids after
Right.
we even come to
It's
terms with what
destabilizing.
this means, that almost everything that we came to believe was true is starting to kind of like slowly get leaked out through secrecy. I mean, the
Yeah.
Epstein files alone are like, oh
Right,
my
right.
God.
But that goes back to what you were saying, which I think is so important, and that is, and I see this also with my college students. Like, I want them to be aware, but I don't want them to feel it's hopeless. Like, we know that's an issue too with young people, and so where do we have a sense of control? And we have that with our family. You know, we can control how we interact with people. We can control how we respond to things. We can create environments that are beautiful. And I also think that, I don't know, like any good novel was set in some amazing war time and it's a love story. And like, I just try to keep perspective. Like, the world has been happening in chaos and, in not in truth for, on and off forever. There's been great moments in humanity, and there have been a lot of not great moments in humanity. But the one core thing is each other, is our children, our family, the love that we have. And you kind of said this, I think, on the podcast that you did with Kennedy. And I was like, yes, right on, because that's what we have, go out and take a walk, do a yoga class, whatever. Those things, grounding things, doing something for somebody else are what we can do. And what can we do about all that noise that's happening?
You just have to be careful what you consume, right?
Yeah.
Me too. Like I listen to the news, and I also don't listen to the news, right? I don't need to confirm over and over and over again what I already know, right? So I don't, if I'm looking for, like, you're going to find chaos anywhere if you look for it.
Mm-hmm.
So we're really careful with what we consume as a family, and I'm careful what I consume now. And I think I used to be an HR executive, and now I own a yoga studio.
That says it
so
all,
it's
right?
a totally different perspective, like going through all that. And yes, like like watching something violent doesn't cause violence. But if you're watching something violent all the time, like I notice that it makes me sad.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel more
Your
depressed.
worldview might be
My
changing.
heart rate is up. So we don't watch, like, my husband and I, like, we don't watch scary movies anymore, even though we both used to enjoy watching them. But I'm like, that
No
just
more nightmares.
doesn't make me feel good
Yeah.
inside. And my husband watches rom-coms now. He's like,
Oh, I love that.
he's like all against it before, but now he's like, this makes me feel good. Like, let's watch it.
That's so funny.
One thing that came out of the work that we've been doing, that we were kind of talking about earlier, is that, and I would say this is probably the core philosophy of what I started to explore, that I felt like was allowing me to think a little bit differently than I had before, was that when my kids were young, I was essentially like, since my youngest son was about 2 years old, I've been trying to do parenting by myself. And it caused me to try to figure out, like, how do I tap into understanding how I'm not a mom, I'm not a woman, I don't have the same natural skills that those have, but it doesn't mean that my sons aren't going to need to be nurtured in times where their mom's not going to be there and I need to fill this spot. But one of the things that came out of that was that I noticed I have a pretty good read of people in general, and I have a really good read of my kids because I'm very focused on them. So I understood what their emotional ups and downs were. Like, I knew, I understood when a tantrum was coming. I understood what a tantrum was. I had skills through being a facilitator to be able to manage those. But what surprised me is that when my kids got physically sick, I started to notice this pattern that my kids were getting physically sick in exactly the same way that I could watch them get emotionally sick. So like when my older son would have the flu, he was not like a hyper dependent kid or anything, but when he got the flu and he got to that point, he would want me next to him, patting his back and just telling him that it was going to be okay, that you just got to get through this. You just got to, you got to move through this moment. And it was very obvious that he wanted me to be there, and that was exactly how he used to tantrum when he was a kid too. And I would need to
Interesting.
sit on the floor and just be like, okay, you can do what you need to, and when you're done, come back and get a hug, and then we'll move on with what we need to do. But like, I'm not engaging in this, but I will be in your presence while you need to go through this so we can get to the other side. Then my younger son, like if he gets sick, he's like, can you please just lock me in the bathroom and let me do my
Leave me
shit?
alone.
And then I'll come out and I'll do cartwheels and go meet up with my friends and go out and do whatever I was going to do anyways, right? Like totally. And that is also exactly how he is emotionally. He's like, just let me like get this out of my system really quickly. And as soon as it's gone, like it's gone, Dad. Like you don't need to keep prying. Stop asking me more questions. Just like shut up and let me move on. But it opened me up to this whole different way of thinking, which was that I was like, well, is there a difference between the way that our body works and the way that our mind works? You
Interesting.
can't actually see your mind. So there is no way to grab onto this like scientific evidence that anyone is 100% sure how the mind works. Not the same way that you can with the body, because the body is pretty measurable. And the basis that I started thinking from was, to me, the basics of the body, and like by all means, this is your specialty, so jump in, right? But like if you look in a mirror and you're not super stoked with what you're seeing, I think you have kind of 3 critical things that you can do. You can control the calories that you intake, you can control the quality of calories that you intake, and then those calories will turn into fuel. And the better the calories, the better the fuel. And then you have to turn that into some sort of movement. And the more you turn it into consistent movement, the more that movement will become a pattern that makes sense to you, and the more comfortable you become in your body over time. But those are essentially the 3 things that your body is going to have to go through that you can actually control. Then I started thinking, I think that the mind is an exact parallel. It's just that what are calories for your body is the information that we're consuming all the time. That's the calories that we're taking in. And if you're taking in what is really healthy calories, that can be very helpful to you.
Yeah.
But if you're taking in junk food, if you're just eating Doritos versions of television all day long, then that shit starts to weigh on the, on the next phase, which is once you've consumed that information, then your mind has to be able to figure out how to turn that into energy, right?
Yeah.
And that
Great
energy,
analogy.
ends up being thoughts and feelings. What thoughts and feelings are emerging from whatever that is, and how do you interpret it? How do you observe that? How are you managing that? And then the last piece, where body requires movement, the mind requires a decision. And we make somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000 decisions a day. And we're more likely to make decisions that are a reflection of who we are, the better information we're consuming on a regular basis about how we can improve ourselves and become, and get closer to our potential. It changed my life to have that thought. I don't know that I'm right. You know what I mean? But I haven't been able to get anybody to debunk that idea in a way that was meaningfully made me feel like it was not possible that our mind and body are a direct reflection of each other. And what I have found is that the more clear I've been able to get my mind, and the more I've practiced getting my body to be exercised, the more access I have to trying to be whoever I really am. Like to be my honest self with people in a room, and not be afraid to be vulnerable, and not be afraid to speak from truth, or at least the most capable I am of truth in that moment.
Right.
Because all the time you realize you have blind spots that you didn't see, that you're, fooled you into thinking that you were something. You created an identity for yourself that you have to then break down again and go back to the studs and figure out how you try to, to rebuild from something simple. But that parallel between those 2 things was incredibly helpful. And I try to think of that in my parenting all the time too. Okay, if I can see something that's going on in your body right now, can I also assume that I can understand that that's a pattern that I'll be able to understand about your mind? And so when you bring something up to me, can I be one step ahead of understanding that this pattern needs to be responded to in this way, in the same way that I could do that with the body?
It's very observant. Crystal, I have to ask you, based on this, I dabbled in group fitness for a while, and took a yoga fit training class. And I remember them saying, don't be surprised if you have somebody who breaks down crying during yoga. And so it kind of goes right to what you're talking about. And
It happens all the time. My
yeah,
husband
so like
does.
It happens
there
to me
is
once
that,
Yeah.
so what's happening with the body and
I
the
think
mind where you
your
have
body
this
holds stress.
release, right?
And you don't always know why.
Yeah.
what comes out.
So that emotional stress
Yeah.
leaves when
And
your
a lot of
body starts.
a lot of us, especially men, they hold their stress in their hips.
Mhm.
So if you're doing a lot of hip opening in like yin or stretching, often it can release tears.
It happened to me, super.
And you're like, where is this coming from?
I was on a trip doing a yoga that I didn't do yoga
Yeah.
before this, and it was part of what we were doing on the trip, and I was doing the yoga, and all of a sudden I started crying, and not like super embarrassing crying like I was
Yeah.
weeping or anything, but it was like pretty obvious that I was crying as everybody looked over at me, and I'm like, I also don't know why this is happening. I'm like, I kind of like, my mom had
That's
passed away not
incredible,
too long
really.
ago, so I kind of thought, okay,
You
this is.
released.
And as
But
a
it-
teacher, you're like, I did it.
But it wasn't. That is kind of how he looked at me afterwards. He was like, it didn't seem like he thought that it was weird, but I went up to
No.
him afterwards and I said, like, I really appreciate whatever just happened. I have no idea what happened, but I do feel like something was released there that,
You might not ever know. Really?
no, I don't care, honestly. It just felt great to have the release.
That makes sense, though.
Yeah.
It
Like,
quiets your mind.
Yeah.
I think that's incredible.
And your
though, when
mind
you
like
think about
always
that.
tries to fill in the gaps. Like our minds always try to
Yeah.
fill in the gaps, whether it's truth,
Yeah.
right, or not.
Mhm.
It's always going to try and fill the
I
gap.
have definitely found that the clearer that I get my mind, the more likely it is that I start finding something that I have to try to figure out in my body. Back pain.
Well, yeah, you're not in your body if you're always like somewhere else with your mind.
Your mind seems to have the ability to be able to be like, slow down and remember that you didn't completely process something here, and you're gonna have to be able to do that. And if you can't do it in your mind, I'm gonna force you to figure out how to do it in your body. I don't know if that is
Yeah.
actually what
Whenever I
happens,
get
but-
sick, it's usually because I'm not giving my body a break.
Yeah.
And
I
then it's
think-
like, I will give you a break and
Yeah.
you're gonna
Yeah.
get really sick.
I think about all the, kind of the classic story you hear, and it happened to me where you go on vacation, and now you find you're sick for the first time all year on vacation, but you're finally allowing, you're stopping the chaos, and your body's like, hey, you've been treating me very well,
Well, to our earlier point, though, it's really interesting because so much of parenting might just be like listening to ourselves.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Because everything that we're going through is what they're about to go through. So if we are living with as much presence as we're capable of in the era in which we're living now, then we get to be a guide to them when they turn 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. Like all of those things are things that if we can stay actively trying to figure out how to be the best the best version of us in those generations, then we can be like, watch out for the 50. Like, this is what I know is the shit sandwich you eat when you're 50. This is the one that I know you got to be careful of.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what I was trying to say to Kennedy that night is like, if you've been divorced, you also might be able to relate to this. It's like, yeah, you might have to face that, right? Like you can't be afraid of that, but be very thoughtful about understanding that the person that you partner with will have a massive effect on the quality of life that you get to live going forward. So don't go into it with some bravado, like this is just about being star-crossed lovers, and if we enjoy our time together, we're going to make everything else work. Like figure out that your value system is aligned,
great.
and then work your ass off to make sure that that person lives their best life.
Yeah.
Don't worry about what you're getting in return. Just make sure that you are
So good.
completely dedicated to figuring out how that person, and even at that, it might not work out. You still might have to eat a giant shit sandwich in your 20s or your 30s or your 40s, but like at least you will have built a version of yourself that you're proud of no matter what.
And I think that's it. Like, I hope I've expressed this with my kids as much as it's come across my own mind, but like telling the truth or being honest or these things that are on your wall, or in the end, we may not get the strategic outcome that we hope, but you can say, I did what I know is right. I did what was right for me, or I was honest, I was authentic, or whatever it was, and that can't be taken away, and so those are the things that we don't know what we're gonna all encounter, even
And I think that's okay.
yeah, it's okay, it's the world, right? It's what it is, and but having the ability to navigate that, all of that is, and you were giving them both as boys are in their 20s and just such great advice about partners and the little things. It doesn't matter what the little things are that you have in common. It's the core value stuff. And I was just like, yes, good stuff.
Yeah, but I would also give Kennedy and anybody else that asked me, like, I would give them honest advice on what to watch out for too.
Yeah.
Because I've got myself in some traps that I would encourage them.
Does it seem pertinent to what we're talking about now, or?
Yeah, I would just say, like, the number one that I would give to young people is I would say work on yourself. Work really hard on yourself. Make sure that you understand, you're very aware of who you are. You have applied as much self-discipline as you can to the areas in which you feel shame or that you don't feel great about yourself, and build your identity based on resilience. And once you feel like you've done those three things and you feel very comfortable with that, when you present vulnerability to somebody else and it's met with defensiveness, understand that that is a flag that you want to get the fuck away from if you are not already entangled in it to the degree where you need to solve that problem. But if you are being vulnerable and they are being defensive, I would not invest in that. I would divest from that if I had the option to be able to do it. That's the advice I would give to my sons. That's the advice that I would give to any young man that asked me. Probably that's the kind of advice that I would give to my sons, and I would wait to be asked from someone else's son before I offered it. But yeah, because that particular pattern, if you're a man who loves a woman, and maybe you could speak to the opposite side, but I don't want to speak on behalf of that. But if you're a man who loves a woman, part of, I think, what is bound in us is that we want you to be okay all the time. You know what I mean? Like, we wake up with this desire to make sure that we're taking.
It's so annoying.
It might be, but it is just part of us in the same way that you might. And so if we choose to be vulnerable and we're met with something that is manipulative, it's very dangerous to us because we keep going deeper into that, and it doesn't usually solve itself. It can oftentimes lead to just drama, just unnecessary drama, and that is that drama, in my experience so far, is what you want to try to avoid. It doesn't help anybody, and drama is only created and sustained through insecurity. No secure person ever creates drama, and no secure person ever perpetuates drama. It is only created by and perpetuated by insecure thoughts and feelings. And all young people, men or women, I would like to help them build security.
Yeah.
I think that's insecurity can come from you as an individual. You don't need to be in a perfect household. You don't need to have. In fact, I would ask this question of the two of you: the things that you love about yourself, like that you genuinely love about being you in these seats right now, did the majority of that come from things that you learned the hard way, or did that come from things that you were entitled to throughout your life?
Hard way.
Yeah.
Always, right?
Right? So we can't avoid the hard way for our kids.
Yeah, nobody can give you that.
No. On that board out there, you know how I was saying accountability is to the left. And so the three principles of accountability that we're trying to build are self-awareness, self-discipline, and resilience. And the reason why I came to those three things, and it felt really important that those were the three things, because those were the only three things that you can't assign to someone else by the time you have them. You can't give someone else credit for your self-awareness. You can't give somebody else credit for your self-discipline, and you cannot give credit to somebody else for resilience. So it means that the end result of those three particular things is self-confidence, which is
It's because it belongs to you.
It can't belong to anybody else. But so many things that we do, even if you play sports or you do all these things that we think are helping us build this like unpenetrable self-confidence, it's just helping us sometimes build confidence in getting positive reinforcement from people who we want to get positive reinforcement from. But it's not necessarily teaching us how to love ourselves. It's teaching us how to love praise from people who we admire or want to be praised by. Two very, very different things, because in the mind, if you become addicted to other people's opinions, it's never ending. Literally never ends.
Yeah, I think that goes back to what you were saying before about being a partner with someone and having to be okay with yourself first, because it's not going to be their job to fix you or help you through things. It's up to you
Yeah.
for those things.
Yeah.
And some of the lessons that I talk to my kids about that I would, relay when they're ready to have partners is, like you said, like when someone's mean to my kids at school or something, and they tell me, I always come at it with empathy. I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry for them. And they're like, what? They said that. I was like, they must feel really bad on the inside to want to make you feel like them.
Mm-hmm.
And I come at that with that perspective
Very good.
all the time. And I've been doing it so long with my daughter that she starting to like bring it up herself.
Yeah, wonderful.
Because we're all going through something
Yeah.
all the time.
Those are particularly tricky ones because I remember my older son got bullied when he was in high school. Same motherfucker came into lunchroom every day
Doesn't mean you shouldn't beat his ass, but
and squeezed either a ketchup or a mayonnaise onto his shirt. And he didn't tell me, just like over time, I just noticed this decay of his soul when he was coming home. Like something was like, I hope that I did my best to stay cool with him. But first of all, I was so pissed at his friends.
Yeah,
I was
it's
so
hard when your kids
pissed
are
at his
bullied.
friends that were sitting at that same table. And I'm like, listen, if anything, I just want you to know that if somebody does that to your friend, you don't ever sit at that table
doesn't
and
mean it's
watch them.
okay.
Yeah. I'm not saying
treat you like that.
I'm not saying be
Absolutely not.
violent. I'm
Yeah.
saying do not be cool with it.
Yeah.
No matter what that costs you on the other end, don't be cool with it. Don't be casual. Don't act like that's like something that's.
Speak up. Yeah.
And then on the other end, I did have to secretly go figure out how I calm myself down because I did want to beat the shit out
Oh
of him.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
absolutely.
Like the fantasies that
All
I
little
had.
girls that are just
If we had another
catty.
guy here, I would guess that I'm not the only one that would have this. But
No.
the fantasies that I had were fucking twisted. You know what I mean? It was like I was so wanting to go to the school and just find this kid. So the emotions that we have around our own children are so confusing at any given time because you're like,
Absolutely.
okay, I understand what my job is, but I also can't not
I'm a
react to what's
human.
happening right now. And what's happening right now is a rage like I've never felt before. You know what I mean? I never felt that rage for myself.
I never felt so helpless as a parent as I did when my oldest was bullied. And it is all that because it's like you know what, you're the adult, but especially if you're watching it. Like I went into the classroom, saw them trip and look at each other, and it's like I had a teacher come up to me, and of course the kids, like having to navigate that is so hard as a parent because the kids are navigating the repercussions of your navigating it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's still a social cost. And weirdly, like the kids that were part of the bullying in this, there were like only 5 boys in a class of 30. And they ended up being his friends later. So I learned a lot, like, be very careful about how you're navigating those parent relationships because those people might be in your life for a lot longer than you think. And your kids are going to move past this and you want to make sure you do too. But I had a teacher come up and say that she saw what was going on and, just making it visible. Your son's a good boy. And I'm in tears just being validated that way. But it was like, I think that I just needed somebody to see it. And we're all trying to figure out how to stop it. But I needed them and I needed my son to know that we're seeing it and we're trying to figure out how to stop it in a way that you are anyway. But so that pain as parent watching, I understand the rage and what you're, because I think I had thoughts too. I'm like, how could I be thinking this way about a child, when I know this is, a child is a product of something else that's going on,
Right.
I didn't see, because he was in high school, I didn't see this kid as a child.
So you saw him as, a little bit more formed.
As somebody who
should
was
know better.
plenty old to not be doing that to somebody else. And if he was doing it then, I didn't like the prospect of the man that this kid was going to turn into.
Right.
So I would guess that your husbands would feel the same way that I do, that like when you're a man, you understand if you are exhibiting bad behaviors when you're a boy, and nobody is teaching you how to curb those bad behaviors, you're not going to become a good man. There's not a question mark in that for me. There is an exclamation point that you need to curb that shit quick when you're
or join the military. No,
Yeah.
well,
I'm just
it works. It
There's
does.
a discipline that comes with that. Yeah.
But you know, the other thing that I did learn from that experience was that, and I'm not, again, I don't want to say that this is right or wrong, and I would love to talk about it if there's a differentiation in opinion. But it did teach me that my well of empathy gets deeper and deeper and more compassionate the younger you are. And go all the way back to you being born. That's where you are going to get the absolute height of compassion, where I will have nothing but love and compassion for you. But I think it's starting to end for me at maybe I'll give you until 27 is the absolute end of what I'll give you.
Oh man.
But at 18, you're starting to lose it for me. But if you're an
Interesting.
adult that still has bad behaviors, I have no interest for you anymore. You have had plenty of life, whatever your circumstances were before you got to wherever you were. You've been making a series of choices that you allowed your behavior to now have to be paid as a consequence by everybody else around you. And the more we all accept that behavior on your behalf, the more we're allowing you to continue to have bad behavior.
Yeah.
But children, I feel completely differently about.
Right.
Children need to make mistakes. They need to bully each other a little bit. They need to understand that it doesn't feel good to be a bully and it doesn't feel good to be bullied.
Yeah.
Neither of these are feelings that are good in your nervous system. So if we can sit you down after being bullied or being a bully and we can say, hey, listen, the whole goal of life is to live your best life.
Right.
That's it. For you to feel the best you can feel as often as you can feel it for the rest of your life. So just tell me, in your nervous system, did it feel good when you got bullied? Did it feel good when you were bullying? If those weren't
Maybe it
feelings,
did though. Like, so I disagree.
please.
I mean, I'm yoga world, right? But I think you should have empathy for everybody. And from what you said earlier about growing up in a household where, you know, you were loved and cared for, and I think that that's really lucky and privileged, and that's not
100%.
everywhere. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of people that you say are making bad decisions and they're not living their best life live in fear because they've never had a mentor or someone to guide them in the right direction. So I actually have more empathy and more patience, I think. And I try to practice that. Oh, they must be feeling really bad on the inside to treat me like that as an adult now and dealing with,
Yeah.
you know, owning a small business and being in HR and things like that. Because man, like they got the raw end. Like
Mm-hmm.
they don't know how to get back on the path. They don't know how to find the path.
I tended. Go ahead.
No, you go.
Oh, I was tending to think along those lines too, because I was thinking also the other part of that story was my oldest was bullied, but he came home and treated his brother pretty poorly, and so that pain was coming out at home, you know, and you know, poor Kennedy because he's the middle. He was the young one, you know,
Young ones, or the middle children.
I mean, okay, so I'm going to be vulnerable and tell a horrible story right now, but I worked with one of my colleagues. She was conflict was her area. And I was coming to work feeling like I am the worst mother in the world because Kennedy pulled a knife on Cullen. Kennedy's like 4, like he's little.
Yeah.
I was babysitting, or I was gone, and babysitter was telling me this, like family friend. And I'm just like, how could this happen? Do I have a child that's a psycho? Like, what's going on? And she goes, what? Well, you know, calm conflict mediator says, and you know, tell me about this. Like, tell me about Cullen. I'm like, well, he's taller than him. He's bigger than him. He walks by him and bops him on the side of the head. And she goes, well, then that makes infinite sense that he went and grabbed a knife because he's small and next to his big brother, he needs something to make him bigger. And I'm just listening to her logic going, okay, so he's, you know, I'm not a horrible mom and he's, you know, not great. And he's not. He was not crazy. But he grabbed the thing that made sense to him at the moment. So I see that pattern, and I also think of adults this way. But feeling-wise, if I'm being completely honest, even raising my kids, I had infinite patience when they were babies. As they started to talk and could reason and logic, I had a harder time with the dynamic of figuring out how to parent.
Mhm.
And as they become teenagers, right, you go through this whole thing again when they're sweet, and before that you're their whole world, and then all of a sudden you get in a car. My daughter, I'm in the car and I dare make conversation with her friends, and I get the evil eye, like, how could you talk to them, Mom? But so I just feel like I've seen these behaviors and I didn't always know how to deal with them. And it is, a we can use the word privilege or whatever, but like, I understand I don't personally a lot of times have the patience that I should have to be able to grant people the grace that they may need. But what do you do when the world has bullies in it? And if we give up, if we don't allow some empathy, I mean, I don't know. Do you think that they're not capable of changing,
Well,
or
so yeah, let me first of all, let me try to make sure that I answer this without any feeling defensive at all, because I don't think that you're wrong either, right? I would just
it's
say
not a
that the
disagreement so
no,
much
it's
as a
not at
different
all, because I
perspective?
actually
Yeah.
loved what you said, and I thought that it was beautiful, and I think that that we probably align on this more than what I had said before would allude to. The conclusion that I've come to from both my personal life and my professional life, where I've been a facilitator and a trainer for a significant amount of time, and have met a lot of
Yeah.
different people in a lot of different environments,
Mhm.
is that as much as I want it to be true that people can change people,
Mm-hmm.
I have come to the conclusion that that is not possible. That people have to want to change themselves,
Yeah.
and then you can be a vessel either through being an example or being a nurturing and compassionate friend who has skills
Mm-hmm.
to allow them to do that. But what is to me has become more obvious is that the older people get, and as they exhibit bad behaviors without wanting to change those bad behaviors, there is no easy path to being able to interact. So if people are coming to you in your yoga studio and they're like, ah, I just feel out of control sometimes. I feel like I can't, there's these subconscious patterns that are just playing themselves out and I don't even realize that they're happening. That is something that if somebody is vulnerable, we should all help that person. It's in all of our best interest to try to help everyone become the best, healthiest version of themselves. But we can waste a lot of energy on people who don't want that help as
Yeah.
they just continue to go into it. And those are the people who I have no patience for anymore. If you want to live a life where you're going to play out nasty patterns in nasty ways so that people feel bad about themselves, it's not that I'm going to have conflict with you. I'm just not going to give you any of my time.
Yeah.
You get
No, yeah,
zero of my
you
most
holding your
precious
back.
The
commodity.
energy, and I
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
feel like I've arrived there as well. Just even in the deep disagreements that we have about this world right now, I I'm not interested in trying to persuade anybody.
No.
If somebody wants to have a deep, authentic conversation, I will have that. But I just don't. I don't think it's a good use of my energy or time if that other person is not willing to kind of play by the rules of, conversation principles or things like that.
Yeah.
Just spirit, kind of in a spiritual, not religious way.
The beauty of a really great conversation is that you realize that all conversations are complex. There's not a single problem that you can be like right side, wrong side, 100%, all in, all out, this is this, this is this. It's all like, okay, well, I kind of understand this, but I have so many questions about this over
Yeah.
here, and I don't know how I would possibly have an opinion on this. One of the things that I've tried to challenge myself to do this year, and I have not been completely successful at this, but it's like something that I would really like to get better at, is trying not to form an opinion about somebody that I've never met.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that I recognized about like meeting people is that so much of what I get to understand about someone is not just in what they say, it's in the body language they have. It's the way that I feel when I'm around them. It's all of these things that have to do with getting in someone's presence to be able to kind of like understand whether this is somebody that you feel like you can
Yeah.
trust, somebody that you feel like you can't trust. That intuition is so important to being
Yeah.
able to understand the person. And so as people try to draw me into conversations about people that I've never met before, I'm like, you know what? I don't know. I don't know if I can have an opinion on this because I just don't know this person. And I want to
Yeah, the
try to
empathy.
reserve
Yeah.
the right
Mhm.
to, to figure that out. But if I have met them, I also don't want to be ignorant to the idea that I just don't like some people, because when I'm around them, my intuition is telling me that this is a person who's going to drag me into drama that I don't want to be a part of, and that's not worth my time anymore.
Yeah.
I find my time to be extremely valuable,
Yeah.
not because it has to necessarily be valuable to anybody else, but to me, it's the only time that I got left. My hourglass is turned and my sand is going in the wrong direction, and I'm not going to waste it. You know what I mean? Like, I want every day to make sure that I'm on it. My foot is on the throttle, trying to figure out, what is my potential? Where can I go? What can I do? How can I try to use whatever skills I have are also the major deficits that I have? How do I love myself wholly by recognizing both sides of that and figure out, where you go with it?
That's so true.
I think that this might be a good
Is it
time to
time?
go into question 2. Oh,
This feels like
good catch.
I've never opened an envelope
I know.
before. I
Well,
feel like
we
I
even try to
should.
seal it for you. We try to add a little. This is where I do like drama.
fun.
A seal is the right.
Can I steal this idea from my class? This
course
is
you
like
can.
so
You
fun.
don't even have to steal it. I'll give it to you.
Yeah.
I'll give you all the envelopes you want.
How has what you've learned as a parent changed the way you live today?
Oh, wow. You both are looking
Oh,
at me.
you can look any direction we want.
Let me look at it again. Sometimes I need to hear it and read it.
What was it like to watch Kennedy on the podcast?
Yeah.
And then after you have been watching that, what has did it change anything? Did your perspective change at all in? Because my son came on this podcast with me, and I didn't think it was going to be that big of a deal. We were doing practice versions of it. It was wild. He talked about things in a way, he talked about his principles in a way that I had never heard him talk about them before. And it was just changed the way I felt to be around him from then on. I don't know, if that was the same for you and watching your son talk about that stuff, but watching our kids talk about things that they care about feels like it's a transmission of the work that we've done in a lot of ways. Does that make sense?
That is a great description. I didn't tell you that I cried twice, 2 or 3 times. I don't know,
I'm sure.
just welled up listening to him. Because he's talking about having been parented, talking about his values and his things that he believes. And
Well, can I tell one quick story? Just
absolutely.
So Kennedy was on. I think that the theme of the episode was read the room. So it had nothing to do with parenting. It was just what is it like to walk into a room and try to figure out how you get a read on the people that you're with? What are you looking for? But it ended up being me and this other gentleman who was sitting in your seat, who was in his early 40s, who's a teacher at Amesbury High School. And then there were 2 young men who were in their early 20s. And so it ended up being a really fun conversation of well, what's it like in the middle part of your life? What's it like in the beginning of your life? And how do we bounce these ideas around? But what he said about you and your husband that was so made me feel like I was going to cry when I was on the podcast. And then later on, I was like, oh my God, if my kids ever said anything like this about me, it would fill me with joy and accomplishment. Is he talked about the fact that he felt like he had a pretty good grounding on how he could understand how to love and be affectionate with anybody that he built a relationship with, because his mom and dad taught him every day when you watch them how to be appropriately loving and affectionate, and that he was 100% sure that the 2 of you were completely in love with each other, and that he felt that on a day-to-day basis. And we were all because honestly, I don't think I grew up in the household that I described, but it didn't feel like my parents were having this unbelievable love affair. You know what I mean? It felt like they were partnered in raising us, and they tried to do the best that they could to build a loving home. But I don't even remember being super conscientious of feeling like they were in love.
Right.
And then I went on and got married myself and realized that I had some major deficits in my ability to be able to speak language of love through physical affection.
Yeah.
It's not that I was uninterested. It's not that I was incapable. It's just that I was I didn't speak the language. Didn't make sense to me.
You didn't know the language.
Somebody would tell me oh, why didn't you hold my hand? I'm like, was I supposed to be holding your hand just then? Was that an expectation? I just was walking down the street and trying to talk to you. I didn't realize.
Yeah.
But to him, he spoke that language. It made sense to him. And I admired you so much in that moment as a parent. It made me really appreciate you.
That's
The
lovely.
other side of that, though, which made it even more meaningful for me, was that my husband and I are, it's not like they've never seen us fight. Like,
Yeah.
And Kennedy and I have talked about it, and I've tried to say, like, this happens. Like, you can get irritated every single day sometimes. I mean, it's very hard to live with someone 24/7. But
You can say
that
that
he
as
took,
many times as you want.
yeah, that he took that away from us made me feel so good, because there were some things I really tried to be conscious of that were things like when we did fight, like you said your parents didn't, you didn't know what was going on. My parents were the opposite. It was way too much, right? But I felt like, maybe I inherited some of the Italian and this or that, I don't blame it on that. But I felt like if they saw us have an argument, they needed to see us make up.
Yes,
and so there were,
absolutely.
not every time, but there have been conscious times where I wanted them to see the apology, because I think we don't see that. We don't get to see that. So, we tried to do that to show that, this is okay. Like, we get upset with each other, but we also, and then there's, I've shared with all of them, there's just some rules that we had. And my husband is a very physical person, and I've always enjoyed that. But, like, he's
you
not a verbal. Yeah, I know. He's like, okay, all right, right. But what I mean by that is he speaks with affection, and his love language is affection. And so when we would have an argument, he wouldn't say he was sorry. I'm the loquacious, need to talk it person. And I had to learn early in our marriage that he would be the first, oftentimes, to grab my hand, and I had to realize, like, okay, he's non-verbally reaching out, and if I reject this right now, this isn't coming my way again. Very often if I don't accept kind of his way of reaching out, even if we haven't resolved the underlying things. So there were things that we've talked about explicitly, or that we've tried to model. It hasn't always been perfect, and to have, of course, there is no perfect, right? And to hear that was just like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited that that's what he took away, and not, you think of your worst moments and like, I don't want him to take that away. But I did. It was such a beautiful thing to hear him talk about what was important to him and his values. And
One thing
that was
kids
a
are
gift.
very, very good at is they know the difference between real and bullshit. Right? So if
Yeah.
you took that away, it's not that he didn't also experience the other side. It's just he knew what was real was your love.
Yeah.
And he knew that, like, people have to have arguments sometimes. I've never been in or known a marriage where two people are with each other as often, making as complex decisions as what it is to
Right.
run a household
Yeah.
together, where you don't run into friction.
Yeah, those people probably don't stay together.
And those people are also, like, anybody who tells you that they have that, they're also posting, kale smoothies on their Instagram as they have a Snickers drawer at their house that they're eating shit that you don't know about all the time. Like, it's
We
not
never
real.
fight. And I'm like,
Yeah. So
yeah.
it's performative.
Yeah.
But he found real. And I think that that's an excellent place to be able to start the conversation about what have we learned, from parenting, is maybe just that, like, it's like we get to always understand that somebody's watching us.
Oh, that's
so that
exactly. That's what I was gonna say.
so we
It's like
always-
they're
They
always
make
watching.
Right.
Be
so we-
better.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, what would happen if that argument had happened while you were on vacation without kids? Would it have played out differently when you were in the immature version of trying to figure out how to
and
do
it
that?
did. First 5 years of marriage.
But
right?
when you have kids and you love your kids,
Yeah.
all of a sudden they
Yeah.
become the eyeballs that you're like, okay, well, we should slow down. We should think about, like, not only what are they seeing, but who are we?
Mm-hmm.
Who are we becoming? What are we doing? How are we behaving? Is that how we want them to behave? Because in so many
Yeah.
ways, the future versions of ourselves is reflected in the way that we want to think about the future version of them. Who we want them to become is actually just us telling ourselves who we want to become.
Right.
And the more we allow our children's eyeballs to be the cameras that hold us accountable to what it is that we should be doing at any given moment, is probably a really amazing lesson of parenting in general.
Yeah. I actually, we argue and make up on purpose in front of our kids too. Like I let them see it
To
sometimes.
see the full cycle of it.
Yeah.
To what
yeah.
degree? Like silly?
No, we don't act it out. Like we don't like let's have an argument about this. But you know, I think it is important for them to see the whole cycle and how to fight fair and how to fight with respect, and that everything's not perfect. And when they get into a relationship and something happens, that it can be repaired,
Yeah.
or maybe it can't. But
Right.
that they're not broken, like you said earlier, because they didn't experience it before. I am someone that needs space when I argue with my husband, and he likes to make up right away. So like that's something that we had to learn in our marriage also. I'm like, all right, I need space, but I'll come back to you in like a few hours when I've cooled down because you don't want to talk to me right now.
Right.
And I think that's a big lesson.
Yeah.
That the kids can learn and watch and
you're all of a
experience.
sudden aware of not audience in a performance way, but audience in a little eyes looking at you like, how's this gonna go? And so you have that responsibility that you didn't have without children.
Because being divorced, right? Like you don't know what they're experiencing at the other household all the time.
Did
And
both of your kids come from your first marriage?
No, my daughter comes from my first marriage, so she goes and sees her dad every other weekend. But it wasn't a good situation. Like it was abusive, and it is challenging because she sees a different perspective there with him and his girlfriend, and she comes home with questions and she sees a difference. So it's you can't control everything that they're gonna experience, even as like at their youngest age. Like I got a divorce when she was almost 2 also, so that was it. Like I only got to see half of that time at that moment.
Yeah. So sorry for that loss, because I know what it is. Like it's difficult to understand exactly what it feels like to not have your kids with you all the time. But I, since my youngest son was 2 years old, I've only been able to see him every other week, right? So my relationship has been with, without.
Yeah.
But what it taught us, what taught all three of us, was quality over quantity. And that is a really great lesson in life. You know what I mean? But it does get weird as they get older too. Because when my son graduated from high school, we threw like a graduation party combined, and then we put up all the pictures of their entire life. And I was like, oh my God, this is the last 12 years of what I didn't see.
Yeah,
All of these pictures of what was happening in the other side while he wasn't with me, and it was like that was probably one of the major breakdowns I've had in the last 10 years of just like, I literally had to leave, and my dad came and found me, and I was just like, Dad, I'm sorry, I'm having a panic attack, I think, right now, because I didn't know that this was what their life was. They look so happy.
Yeah.
It's not how I was imagining this.
Right.
You were pining for you.
There's a disconnect happening. Reordering.
It's just like part of me was embarrassed. Part of me was embarrassed that I felt that way. But it's everything is beautiful and difficult simultaneously, right? And the more, like, if you stay close to the bullseye version of what a family is, then the challenge that you're going to have is figuring out how to prepare them for the difficult. If you get further and further away from the bullseye, you already know how to do difficult. You're doing it.
Yeah.
What you have to do is figure out how to come back to calm and to make it feel like the bullseye is right here, and that it's not like some image of what a family needs to be to still make sure that the foundation is love and that the long-term relationship is investment.
Right.
But it's infinitely complicated when your kids are both with you, not with you, getting advice, getting ideas. But I can say, maybe for the two of us, but for anybody who listens to this, I think that the only thing that works, no matter what the dynamic is in your family, is talking. You just got to talk. You got to talk about everything. Every time something comes up, every time somebody feels uncomfortable, you have to lean into it and not lean away from it. And the more you do that, we get good at anything that we practice, and so do our kids. So it's like every time something doesn't go the way we want it to, that is also an amazing opportunity. It's just not the opportunity we want in that moment. It's the most uncomfortable thing to do in the moment. but it's 100% the opportunity that gets you closer to where you want to land.
I think what makes it really difficult at this time and their ages now is that my son is from my second marriage. So my daughter goes every other weekend to her dad's house. So now we're in this world of, a few years ago it was, all right, Miles, my son, understands. I was like, should I say his name?
12 people have ever listened to this podcast. Don't worry about it.
Understands, is starting to understand more. And we have to decide, okay, well, we can't just all sit at home and do nothing while my daughter's away.
Yeah.
Right.
How do we navigate?
Life doesn't go on hold.
Right. What is
but
that
but
3-version
doing
dynamic, a
something,
4-version dynamic?
and her not feeling completely left out. But then again, she gets 2 Christmases, she gets 2 birthdays. And, she comes home and she missed out on something that we did. It's really hard.
Yeah.
Because she does feel left out in that way, especially Christmases where, Santa comes and we we're not going to not experience Christmas with my son.
Right.
And then she comes home a few days later and, Santa's gifts are there for her, but
So hard.
we're celebrating again, but it's not the same.
Yeah.
It seems, I've heard this from other people, it's not been a strength of mine, so I don't want to pretend this is probably my greatest weakness as a father, but I think it's all about creating rituals. It's all about creating rituals that to our children feel like something that they're excited to do with their children. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the rituals that were passed on to us. We might have experienced Christmas in this way, but what we have to do is make sure that Christmas is experienced in this new way that feels equally exciting and equally exciting to feel like that this is what Christmas is going to feel like every year.
Yeah.
I did not hit the mark on that, but now looking back on it, it's okay, I'm going to try to hit the mark on that for my grandchildren.
Yeah.
I'm going to really try to make sure that I focus on rituals, that having stuff that feels whether it's every quarter or even the traditional holidays don't even feel like they do this as well as we could do on our own, of just being what is the thing that you can make sure every summer, you're going to go on this specific kind of
Right.
vacation, or you're going to do this, or, I started taking my kids on a ski trip every year.
Yeah.
That was really helpful for us to bond. Trying to find those kinds of moments
so.
where you can get into that. Yeah.
I don't think it's too late though. I think I don't think it's too late. You said something to that effect, but I think of even my oldest who's 27 and some of the rituals that so even just looking at his registry for the wedding, we got to see some of the things that he wanted or things that we did that were kind of ritualistic. During COVID, he was 21, but during COVID we had lemon drops and pizza every single Friday night. And his girlfriend would come over because you could only be at, you have your small circle of friends. And, he's got a pizza oven on his registry. And I'm like, that was
Yes.
something that it wasn't, maybe I'm taking more credit there if he ever does listen to this, if he's one of the 12. But I'm just thinking, I know that was something we all felt like that was really special that we had that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I started, I did this with my daughter, do what you will, but she bonded very much. She's the youngest of 2 boys, so she's very much about sports and really connected with her dad about lacrosse. And I'm trying to weave my way in there, and so we started going to New York City first week of December before the prices on the tickets get really expensive, $32. We took a train, and you get into New York City, and all of a sudden my 13-year-old or 14-year-old was looping her arm into my arm, and because there's so many other people around, it's overwhelming. And she put her AirPods in my ear to hear her songs, and we did that for a few years. And now that it was only 3 years, and that created a foundation of something that I know is really important to us. And it was the experience, not the place. But I agree with the ritual thing. I think that's such a cool thing. I think it helps them feel grounded because we can be gone, but those rituals will mean something to them. And yeah, I think that they are important.
So I think you're 100% right. And I also agree that you don't ever have to stop making rituals. And I've definitely started to experience how rituals also shift
Yeah.
as I haven't had the privilege of raising a young woman, but with young men, it has a lot to do with finding common ground too. Like my older son and I started. I raced cars when I was in my early 20s, and so I had sort of a motorsports background, and he always knew about that. And so, like, then him and I started racing go-karts together when he came of age, and that was a really great experience to not only spend time together, but also do something that was competitive.
Yeah.
So there was like parts of our
Fun.
personality that we got to learn about each other, and that we got to work as a team, and we got to. But there are some. I just want to own pieces that I didn't do as well as I wish I should have, because it is really important to acknowledge that too, which is that one of the things that we know for sure scientifically about our brains is that conception to 7 years old is where all of it's happening. That's where the deeply, deeply ingrained patterns start to come in. And then from 7 to 14-ish, you know what I mean? You go through another phase. And then after puberty, it's like a whole nother world that opens up in the way that we think about things. And there are patterns and rituals that if you can get into that conception to 7, really give children a sense of comfort and structure.
Routine
And I think that it actually
predictability.
affects them in the nervous system for the rest of their life. Now, just because you don't get that doesn't mean that you're broken or that you need to like mend something outrageous. It's just like, if you're thoughtful as a parent and you can think about, okay, the 0 to 7 is one. This is one chapter that I've got to focus on.
Hurry up.
Then there's chapter 2. Then there's chapter 3.
Yeah.
Those things.
I definitely did better in some chapters than I did in others.
Yeah, but how is that? That's true of life too, right?
Yeah.
Like, in what chapter of any of our lives did we get everything right? It's a progression of. Hopefully we get more right the longer we go.
And that's like part of parenting, right? That's a really important part, is to like admit to your kids when you make a mistake.
Oh.
I think so too. Yeah.
Or tell a story of when you made a mistake so that you can have a lesson learned somewhere in there sneakily also, right?
Yeah.
Or be like, I don't know the answer to that, so that they don't think that you know everything, because I don't know everything.
I've tried to apologize to my kids, although I realize it's a fine line. Like,
I'm right.
if you keep making the same mistake over again after a while, like it doesn't have the credibility it could have. But to try to own things, like, yes, my emotions got the best of me. I jumped too soon to make judgment, really whatever it was. But yeah, I mean, some days it's just like, it's hard to think you've done anything right.
COVID, right? During COVID, I was like, I'll do better tomorrow. I'll do better tomorrow.
That's fair,
it's going to be
That's
fine.
fair.
I'll do better tomorrow. My kids were 6 months and 4. And I was like, and my husband and I were like both working in the same room. The 4-year-old was watching the 6-month-old. We're like, it's okay. It's fine.
That
I'll do
was
better
an
tomorrow.
insane time to live through.
It was an insane time to live through. And there are some times in parenting where you just got to survive.
Yeah.
And you get to the next day and you don't take yourself too seriously, and you don't assume that one day is going to catastrophically affect.
No, because we're showing up and trying again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think showing up is actually the lesson. I would say, like, I only came to this conclusion upon reflection, but I would say one of the proudest parenting moments that I've had was that when my older son graduated from high school, I decided that I wanted to get him a watch. As just like a symbol of him like entering the world, and something that made him feel like he could both wear it casually, but also he could wear it to a job interview, or he could feel, So we went to this watch store, and I had just gone through a divorce. I had just lost literally everything, and I just was not flush in any way. It was a rough moment. Both as a parent, I was just like in dread that I wanted to do this thing for my older son, but I also knew that it was like not a responsible thing to do, and I was just, it was what it was. But we went into this watch store, and like, I had set a budget, which I thought was more money than I had ever spent on myself for a watch. So I certainly wasn't thinking that I needed to go over this budget. But we walked into this like jewelry store that also had watches, and they start showing us around, and every price tag is like 10x what I thought we were going to spend. And eventually and the young man behind the counter, I say young man, but he's probably like in his early 20s. He was doing a great job showing us these watches, but he was in a very fancy store and he was dressed a little bit sloppy. You know what I mean? Like his shirt wasn't tucked
Like
in.
he's not buying these watches.
But he was really kind to us. And at some point I just said, hey, listen, I really appreciate you. You're doing a great job. You know a ton about what you're talking about here, but I got to be honest, this is out of my price range. Like I'm just in the wrong place. Can you point us into the direction that we should be going? He's like, the mall is right there. Go to K Jewelers, go in there. They're at the price point that you want. And he even was so kind to give us suggestions as to like, here's the brand that is a really high quality watch, but is within what you're trying to do.
Okay.
Totally was wonderful, right? We get out into the car, and it happened to be that my older son had also driven his car, and I was with my son in my car. And so we're heading over to the mall to go meet up again. And I say something to my younger son about like, man, he was dressed kind of sloppily for being in a really nice place. And my son turns to me, he's like, Dad, you're just being an asshole. Like he was super nice to us the whole time. You're just embarrassed. Just admit you're embarrassed. And I was like taken aback for a second. And I don't know that I don't even remember how I handled it in the moment, but I don't remember being like super mature about it. I don't remember being like, oh, you're right. And then I took maybe a day or something and reflected on it and had to come back to him afterwards and be like, you know what? I think you just taught me one of the most important lessons I've ever been taught in my entire life, which was that I just tried to gaslight that young man because I felt insecure.
You felt bad.
And you
Yeah.
called me out on the fact that I was making a nasty comment because I felt insecure, and you opened up a blind spot for me that wouldn't have been opened. And I don't have adults in my life that will do that for me. And you did it for me as a 13-year-old boy. Like, thank you.
I'm so glad you told the story, because there's been this story since this card came up that has been floating with me. And it is that, but it's a younger version, but and it's a lot of my flaws as a person. But my daughter and Kennedy were in the back of the car, and my daughter is 5. And maybe I had too much of the idea that she was going to be mini me and I was going to dress her like me, and, and she wanted none of that. Like when she was little, great, really little. But as soon as she, became more independent, we started calling it crazy cute, because she was never going to match. And, she just had her own way about her, lots of color. And the hair was a battle. I could not get her to brush her hair. Yeah. I couldn't brush it. She wouldn't brush it. It was big nest in the back. And so we're coming back. And so if she's 5, Kennedy's 3 years older and he's 8. And there was a little girl in the class that made a really nasty comment. And Maddie's telling me the story, and she's upset. And she's like, this girl said something about her hair. And my stupid response was like, well, maybe if you brush your hair, or let me brush it. And Kennedy says, Mom, that's like saying that it was okay for this little girl to bully her. I said her name. And it was so quick and so insightful and so in my face, of course I shouldn't have said that. That was not the important thing at all.
It can be both. Yeah. It can absolutely be. Yes, and.
Yeah, but to see that he saw that so quickly, and he was so young, to see that I had no empathy for my daughter. I was using it to, get a cheap shot in about how I wanted to brush her hair. But those moments when you see your kids point out gently, wait, that's kind of defying everything that you might have taught us before. He didn't say those things, but I knew he's kind of calling me out.
Stop learning what I'm teaching you.
Yeah, and it's okay. It is. It's in reflection, a proud moment. Mm-hmm. In reflection.
Yeah.
Right.
Not proud of my behavior.
Exactly.
But I was proud of my son.
Both, right? Kind of personal shame and pride that go together.
Yeah.
But maybe that's because the point of parenting should always be that we raise our children to be better than us. Like that
Right.
is definitely the goal that we have
Forever,
of
right?
being
That's
children,
generation upon generation.
Yeah.
right? Like the goal of being a child of somebody else is to be like, thank you for, for whatever you gave me, good or bad, it put me on a path to try to be the best version of me, whatever that is, right? How do we nurture that as parents as the goal? Is not to be like me, it's to learn from the things that I can help you with, but definitely learn from the things that you're like, oh, I do not want to do that like my dad. I want to do
Right.
this differently. I want to be different. I want to be better than this. Because there's so many things that we have to deal with that are generational to us. That does not mean that it needs to be carried forward by our kids. They can
Absolutely.
transcend the things that were, that were our generational boundaries and go beyond into a version of themselves that could perpetuate our family lineage forever. I mean, that
Right.
is
More
legacy. It is
loving,
legacy.
healthy relationships. And you talked about earlier a little bit about your house and how you didn't want to replicate that. And I feel like a lot of what I saw in my parents' marriage too, and the way, it was a different time, but just the impatience and things like that. But I also know that if these habits and these scripts that we hear, when we say we sound like our parents, right? Like in those moments where we're not taking the time to reflect, I'll speak for myself. The script comes out and it's like, oh my God, I sound like my mom or I sound like my dad. But I do feel like there has been, like an effort to try and make positive changes that I do see. Like, I love this idea, like just keep, if they can take my faults and not replicate those, like we're getting a stronger family lineage away from the more dysfunctional kind of habits that we brought forward about whatever that was.
I think the world has changed, though.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's now acceptable to go to therapy. It's more acceptable to be
Yeah.
vulnerable, to say hard things,
Men have
to
a different role,
not be
right?
perfect. And I
Yeah.
think back, for my parents, everything had to look pretty imperfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now it's like maybe that's where social media can help sometimes. I mean, people overshare, but you're like, oh, okay, well,
Yeah.
I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
Yeah, the isolation that, because I don't think parenting, this is the world according to Renee, but I don't think we were meant to raise children, especially if we take the traditional stay-at-home mom. I think we've raised kids in clans before, and then we created communities. My husband's mother, was like grew up in was a young woman in the 50s, and they had bridge clubs and they let their kids run all around while they did things together. But I just don't think this isolated person at home, whether that be a mom or a dad, was really ever the way human beings raised children until the last like 40 years or so. And the pressures coming out, and that would have been my mom's generation.
Right.
Like, she had 6 little kids at home, a husband who was building his career, and like you said, nobody's talking about it. The roles are really fixed still, and so for sure, when I talk about that, I don't mean to like disparage what they had to go through, but I I think this parenting thing, it was always meant to be more communal than it is, even still today.
Well, we do have to be careful too, though, that like you were saying before, that you recognize patterns from generation to generation, but what we want to try to avoid is allowing the pendulum to swing too far.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll give an example of I've always had offices that were above coffee shops. And so every day, if I'm working on something, I try to go down to the coffee shop, not only to get a coffee, but it's also like my opportunity to just observe human behavior for a little bit and be quiet. I don't try to talk to anybody. I'm not there to like strike up conversation. I'm just like observing the flow of how people come in and out of these places. And one of the things that I definitely observed about parenting is that you can see very quickly that there seems to be a lot more in this generation of parenting where like all actions are permissible, right? Like kids are in a coffee shop, like grabbing the stir and like throwing them on the ground and just being
Tell
like
me about it. I own a coffee shop.
completely. But
Yeah.
so like outside of saying like I have no interest in trying to say what's the right or wrong way to course correct for that, because it has to do with your own kid, right? And how you want to do that. But what I would say has become very obvious is that what I noticed as a pattern was that the kids who were doing that had parents who were talking to them in a voice that sounded like they were talking to them at an age younger than they appeared to be. And the kids who were appropriately behaved, and I'm not even saying perfectly behaved, because I think kids need to be kids and we don't need to have this like adult expectation on kids. But they always seemed to have parents that were talking to them in a tone of respect and talking to them as if they were the age that they wanted them to be. And that seems like a pretty basic thing that we could talk about, of being like, it's really important that we don't talk down to our children, not because that is disrespectful to the kids, although I do think it is. They're a human being. They don't deserve to be talked down to. It's because it's only going to create a little pain in your ass. You know what I mean? If you talk down to your kid, they're going to do downward
Right.
behaviors. Like, we need to talk up to our kids and have expectations that they want to rise to the occasion to be the best version of themselves. But that's like, especially with the phones and the distractions and stuff, that seems to be where the pendulum, I wouldn't say that it's 100%, but if I walked into a coffee shop, I would say that unfortunately it's over 50% of the kids are acting in a way that they don't seem to have any level of guidance in how they course correct their behavior to something that would be appropriate for their age and the environment.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big problem, because like we were talking about with the bullies, that doesn't stop at that age.
No.
That just gets worse and worse and worse the older you get. And then you become an adult trying to adult, like starting adulting in your first career or out in the world. And you just have no idea how off the mark you are in the way that you behave around everybody else, because nobody gave you the guidance of understanding how to like kind of bring that into something that was, I don't know what your thoughts are, but you own a coffee shop, so you must have fascinating thoughts on this.
I mean, having little kids now, right? And being in sports or school systems or around other parents, there is a broad way of parenting. And you have to find your community, if you're lucky, also in parents similar, not the same
Right.
as you.
Yeah.
I'd say like in our friend group, probably because my husband, but we're definitely more like structured. And then like I know that there's kids on my daughter's soccer team and whatnot and sports teams where the kids like stay up till 11 o'clock at night at her age.
Yeah.
And that's not something I would ever do with my kids, but that works for their family. It just is not going to work for my family. So I think, like you said, there's no right or wrong. I'm certainly not going to tell somebody how to parent their kids. But you'll find out, I guess.
Yeah.
But like you guys have older kids. At some point you've done not all you can do, but you've done the most amount that you can do probably in one area. And then you just have to how do you just like let them kind of go?
I'll say from my point of view, I think that raising kids is exactly like starting a business, in that the harder you work in the beginning to make sure that the foundation of it is very strong, the easier it gets as it grows. But if you have obvious things that you neglected in the building of your business, if you know that there are areas where you're like, I'm good at the creative, bad at the financials, I'm great at the financials, not paying attention to the creative, whatever that is, those deficits show up with growth.
Yeah.
And they get exaggerated with growth. And that has been my same experience for kids. Like, where I failed my sons in my parenting has become more obvious as they've gotten older. And luckily, I've also been trying to grow simultaneously. So it was a little bit easier for me to be able to acknowledge where I had failed them and have that conversation with them and be able to apologize and allow them the emotional reconciliation that they needed probably to be able to move forward. But it gets bigger. Problems don't get smaller with time and growth. They expand and they get bigger. The parallel between owning and running a business and raising children is like, for me, has been unbelievably consistent.
Well, that's helpful.
Yes.
Because you run a business.
I have a little baby business right now, so
Yeah.
that's helpful
Yeah,
perspective.
but you know what's really important with both, which is that you have to treat both with like individual love, but you have to build everything to scale, right? So you can't have an idea that you're just passionate about because it's cool for you. You have to have an idea that can actually scale so that it's not just one
Pivot,
yoga
pivot,
studio.
pivot,
It's like
pivot.
2 yoga studios,
Yeah.
3 yoga
Pivot,
studios.
pivot. There's parenting right there. Pivot, pivot, pivot.
Yeah.
That work. That's not working. Okay, this
Yeah.
way.
Adapt.
Yeah.
Adapt or die.
Yeah.
That is the same for business as it is for parenting, is
Yeah.
that if you're trying something and it's not working,
Mm-hmm.
adapt. Little bit. Not like pendulum swings all the time, because
Yeah.
that doesn't work either. And in business, that definitely doesn't work. It's like incrementally, like, okay, small change, small change, small change. Okay, this is
Yeah.
becoming more coherent. Small change, small change, small change. Oh, okay, like now I'm seeing other things open up that I wasn't able to see before. I think that's the same thing with parenting. It's just like none of us are going to get it right at any given moment, but it's like, okay, every day, am I paying attention to what I could do better today?
Yeah.
Is there better today?
That stability, tension with change. That's that pivoting, but not swinging, so that the world is rocked for them. But I think how important my friend group of moms was and is. They're still my friends today, but there were about 7 of us that would text, and it was a group text. It was simple. It was things like, "Did you get your permission slip in?" and things like that. And so a couple of the moms were like me, and it's like, what and a couple of them were like really good about keeping up with that, and it was a community to just share frustrations, but know that we love our kids to death, or whatever it was, right?
People you can be real with.
People we could be real with, and I really treasured just that. It was an intellectual community in that sense, that we weren't like writing helping each other change diapers and things like that. This is later, but that was super, super important for me to kind of manage, to get them to the older part. But we didn't have really turbulent teen years. I had the normal, like little standoffish kind of stuff. We had some bullying. We had some really trying to like the inclusion stuff. I think is really hard, especially with
girls.
I think the girls.
I like how you two whisper to each other to that point.
The girls.
There's this.
It's just hard.
It's really, really hard.
Rather than punch each other, I think.
Yeah. A lot of the pain you feel for your kids is like no pain you ever feel for yourself, right? The bullying and then the inclusion, those things still stick. But those things, just navigating those with other parents was kind of helpful. But I think you're right. The foundation of knowing, like, I think just them knowing they were also going to make mistakes and that it wasn't going to be the end of the world. We weren't big on the grounding. We didn't have curfews for any of them, but I had rules like, you need to be somewhere by midnight, and you need to call me and tell me where you are, because I don't want you driving, the roads at that point. So there were things with logic and reasons. And, we had a couple of big fights that we might remember, but it felt like they were willing to there's probably so many stories I don't know. I'm going to find out in the next 10, 15 years. But.
That is probably fun to like as your kids become full adults, the number of stories that you get to learn that were like completely invisible to you.
I'm like, what?
I also think though that it would be helpful as parents to be able to talk about rules. I wouldn't say rules are necessarily the important thing, but boundaries definitely are. Boundaries are very, very important in any relationship. In fact, any adult that's been in a relationship with another adult understands that boundaries are the only way that a relationship can stay together, is making sure that you have them and that you honor them.
It's boundaries all the way.
And I think that that's a really important thing for kids to understand. But one of the things that is a challenge about setting boundaries with kids is also making sure that you don't create boundaries that are not realistic to what you can actually control.
Yeah.
So like as your kids get older and they start driving, setting...
You sucked in air on that.
Setting boundaries that are beyond what you're willing to control. I have seen this happen between, not necessarily, I've seen this happen in the kind of friend groups that you develop, right? So one of the things that definitely happened as my older son got his license was I started hearing more parents talk about the fact that they track their kids on their cell phone all the time.
Yeah.
And I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but that wasn't something that I was interested in doing. I just didn't feel like that was actually building trust with my son. And I felt like part of what he needed to do was go out and build an identity that had nothing to do with me knowing where he was, and that we had to be able to like build equity, not authority.
Yep.
You know, because he was about to go out on his own. So what good was my authority going to do in that way? That wasn't going to help him figure out what the next thing was. But I ran into a lot of parents who disagreed with me pretty passionately about how important it was to track everything all the time, know where their kids were at
Yeah.
any given moment, know how fast they were traveling down the road, send me messages about, you know, those kinds of things.
Driving,
And I was
yeah.
like, whoa, we are getting to a nanny state that we've got to slow down and figure out, do we want this? Like,
Right.
what's that anxiety that because I already feel like after my older son was born, I never slept the same again, ever.
No.
I've never had a night of sleep that was the same since he was born. It's like something in the back of my mind is always making me think that I'm going to have to wake up at any moment.
Yeah.
And I've like, I sleep
It never goes away.
I sleep fine. Like I'm not complaining about it, but it is just not the different. Like I remember being Oliver and being like, oh, I could sleep. You know what I mean? Like if you don't have kids and you don't have to worry
no
about it.
worries.
Yeah, just like you were
Exactly.
talking about before, if you don't have
Long
kids, like
for
you
that,
don't
yeah.
know.
But once you have them, so like, do we want to also adopt an anxiety about things that you cannot control that are going to go into the adolescent experience of needing to be a little bit more curious and adventure and
Oh,
like
then you stop living your life.
Yeah.
I think that's also it's like the teenage version of do
Like
you
you
let the
still
kids
get to
sleep in
live
bed
your
with you?
life as
Yeah,
parents,
yeah.
right?
You know what I mean? Like, do you lose the intimacy with your partner when they're sleeping in bed, where you guys need to connect? You need to be
Right.
able to have that, so that your relationship doesn't become transactional or functional or like lack
Yeah.
passion. But at the same time, as the kids get older, you deal with this whole other thing, which is like, can we let go of them and reconnect with the time that we have back now?
Right.
Is there an opportunity in the fact that we don't have to be monitoring everything so much, and now we can go out and figure out what a date night is like without
Right.
having to worry about babysitters? Now, you know,
It's the weirdest thing, and this happens with other parents that have kids. They've told me the same story. Like when your kids come home and you're in your house, all of a sudden you're like, where are they? They're at school. I don't know how late they're up, and I'm not thinking about it every night. But when they're back in the house, this worry happens again. But we chose not to track our kids. I was really impacted by a college student of mine that came to me and was asking it sophomore year, like, how do I, let my parents know I don't need to be tracked anymore? And he felt so violated by this thing that had followed him into college. And there was a moment where I was thinking about it, and some of my friends were doing it and still, still do it. And I actually was negotiating. Kennedy's a great negotiator, and I was talking to him, and because he was the one that it was part of that friend group of parents, and everybody was doing it, and I'm like, and he made the case. He's like, he like sat me down. Let's talk about this. This has got to be middle school, and it was about trust and autonomy and all that kind of stuff, and so. I did believe everything that that all the values that he was expressing. I'm like, yes, those are my values too. So we didn't do it. The only time now with the daughter, sometimes she's driving, and she's 20 now, so she's not 10. But like, she's going up to Maine or something, and I'm like, would you turn your location on, just so I know you're not on the side of the road thing, right? And she's happy to do that. She'll share her location, and her brother. I say when you're in the house, it's, you're adults or whatever, but you live in a community. So this isn't about me tracking you. It's just like your dad doesn't just walk out of the house and never say where he's going. Like
Right.
we're part of a community here. So we kind of just
Right.
keep an eye on each other.
There's
So
an
for this,
ecosystem that
yeah,
we're
an
trying to run.
ecosystem.
Yeah,
So for the sake of like the people you're living with, so that they don't wonder or worry, just let us know, you're staying the night this or you're doing that. And if they come home, I ask them could you just text that you're in your bed so I don't, when I wake up, walk the hall to go see if you're in your bed, only
Are you
because I'm
breathing?
not sleeping.
Not that
Like you wake up at 1 a.m. and you're like, I can't go back to sleep if I don't know where,
Yeah,
and my irrational 1 a.m. brain is like, I need to know they're in bed, but it's not about surveillance at all. And I really try to talk about, like, it's just, if we do check in, it's just letting people know where you're at, so they, but we
I
don't
think that's
follow
fair. I
them.
think
We
that's
don't follow them.
respectful.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to do that in other relationships,
Right.
Guess
right?
what?
That's a
As
reasonable
we
boundary.
age,
You're
they're
right.
gonna like. I think about my parents sometimes, and like in big storms or whatever, and I'm like, are they okay?
Yeah.
And
right.
all of a sudden you're parenting your
Do your
parents,
parents
right?
say, text me when you get home? Like my parents
My
still
parents,
do
like,
that.
My dad just got a cell phone like I don't know, like 10 years ago. They live in
A
the
true
woods.
Renaissance man.
But
All
like
right.
Yeah.
he just like I don't need to know. People don't need to know where I am. I don't need to talk to anybody. So and my mom doesn't have a cell phone. So like they're not like
My mom's.
texters. They're not social media.
Are your parents the
I'm
most
from the
interesting
woods.
people? Yeah.
From the woods.
Are they hippies? Like, what's
No,
Where are you from?
Ashburnham.
Okay.
So it's like North Central Mass. But they moved out there
Yeah, there's an
because they
independence.
don't want to be near people, like lots of people.
So are they? I don't think I've ever heard of an adult that doesn't have a cell phone.
I mean, he has a cell phone now. So they had like a really bad ice storm. I don't know, maybe like a decade
I remember
ago.
that ice storm. Yeah.
And I was like, I couldn't get in contact with them. And I'm like, I have no idea. So at that point, they got like a track phone, like like you
Yeah.
pay a certain amount and it works for a little while. And they didn't have it on ever, but they had it like just in case. And then more recently, my dad has a cell phone now. But they're just not, they don't use a lot of technology. Like my mom still leaves my voicemail like, this is your mom. Like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I know this is you.
I'm not saying this, although I think I might be able to, but like it's also a weird experience when you get to the point where maybe the ideas that you have exceeded the ideas that your parents
Oh,
have
for
had.
sure.
And
For
then you get
sure.
into a place of like, okay, like how much do I still listen?
Yeah.
Right. And it like that's a very strange time in all of our our
Yeah.
lives
Like,
and our
they don't
parenting
know
lives.
everything. They don't know everything.
Well, not only do they not know
Weird.
everything, but they
Yeah.
might have
They make
gotten a couple
mistakes.
things wrong
Yeah.
that we like want to slow down and be able to listen to. Yeah, that's a really challenging experience in all of our lives to be able to, it's like meeting your teacher at a bar. That kind of weirdness where you're like, hold on, the whole image that I had
You
of the
don't
way that
live
this is
at
supposed to work
school.
is that like
Like my kids think,
I know.
my son, they're still there. No, they live at home.
Yeah.
it's just one of those paradigm shifts.
Yeah.
That's very
Yeah.
difficult to
Yeah.
come back from once you've gotten to the point where you feel like that relationship has evolved.
But you need to have boundaries there too. Like I know that I need to have like boundaries with my parents too, because I can't control what they do and their decisions that they make, even though I think sometimes they're making terrible decisions. That's their life.
Mm-hmm.
So I've developed boundaries probably over the last 10 years where I'm like, I can't fix them. I can't make them this way or that way or help them
Right.
bring joy into their life. Like that's not my position.
Yeah.
And it's not helping me by focusing my energy there
Right.
either.
Unfortunately, when we were talking about before, like a while ago, when we were talking about, I guess the question, it should have been a question, not a statement from my part, but is it possible to be able to help people if they don't want to change? And my conclusion is that no, it's
Yeah,
not.
I
Like
agree with that.
you and the more that you try to influence change, the more it corrupts your relationship with that person. So
Acceptance.
kind of, or distance. Like those
Yeah,
are the two
true.
options that we have, right? It's that I can accept you, but some people I'm sensitive to the idea because I've been in intimate relationships with people who had relationships with their family that I was observing as a partner, as somebody who loved this person, but not the one who had to grow up in that household. And I never tried to have an opinion about it, but I was able to observe that they seemed to be the healthiest version of themselves with a little bit of distance.
Yeah.
That when they were in it, it was as if they were in a trance that they couldn't control because their nervous system was so bound up into what they had felt when they were a kid that they just could not unwind that.
Mhm.
And so it broke down all of the ideas that I ever had about like, you got to be with family all the time. Like, it's
Yeah.
like family or nothing. All of those all went away. And, we talked about this a little bit last night because it was a little bit more about the theme, but I've had probably, I would say 3, maybe 4, but 3 really solid breaks of my identity where I thought that I was this one thing and then something would happen in my life and it just disconnected my battery to the point where I was like, what the, like
Mm.
I thought that I was going to be this version of a father, this version of a husband, and then all of a sudden somebody else makes a different decision that you have no control over, and it's like, whoop, okay, none of these things exist. So does that mean that none of those things were real in the first place?
Mm.
And it brings you down to 0, and 0 hurts. It hurts in your nervous system. It hurts in your feelings in ways that I had never felt before. But you also gives you a choice, and the choice is always like, do I want to build more beliefs that I now have to defend? Or do I want to stay with the least number of beliefs that I can so that I can stay as free and curious as possible to be able to become whatever is possible? Sometimes families are so restrictive to your ability to be able to not build a belief system that they need to reinforce for you that
Mhm.
distance is the only way to be able to become a free thinker.
I think it comes back to the theme that seems to be popping up tonight of boundaries. Like,
Boundaries.
I think a lot of parenting is negotiating, navigating boundaries, and it's the same thing with our families and parents,
Yeah.
and um, the emotional boundaries, physical boundaries, whatever they are. That sometimes political boundaries, I don't know. Um, and there it's different with like there's no universal for that, right? It's so dependent on the people, the experiences, their experiences in the past, and so you wouldn't have like a universal like this is how it should be for my kids. I think about my son getting married now. They live in San Diego, and I think like I hate that they're far away, but I think it's really, really good for them to spend their first few years of marriage away from family.
I do too.
And I'm gonna throw myself in that. Like we are a close family, and I know how my family is. Expected to be at everything, and you admit. I mean, now it's insane. Like there's 6 kids and 17 grandkids, and all. It's like it never ends, and I don't want to put that on them without realizing that I'm doing that. And I think it's really good for them to go get solid. My husband and I had that chance because of the Navy. And I thought it was really good for us, like just to be away and really figure out who we are as a couple before we have to kind of deal with all the other relationships that are really important, but are going to need some boundaries for a
Yeah.
healthy new life for them.
When my younger son or my oldest son was born, I was so young myself, and my then wife was, we were the same age, and so we leaned heavily on my parents to help us through that. And I don't necessarily regret that, but I do think that what happens oftentimes is there's an enmeshment in the way that older generations, if you ask for their help at times where you really need it, sometimes they don't know how to stop.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They don't know.
It's the role you gave them. So like, how do they know you don't need that role anymore?
Exactly. Whereas if you go off and even if you're struggling a little bit in the beginning, but you're figuring out that role on your own and you're figuring things out for yourself, you begin to become self-reliant on your own philosophies rather than looking. It's like that what we talked about with equality. It's like such a difficult thing to understand that if you believe that you should walk into a room and never look down on anyone, you also have to walk into a room and never look up to anyone.
Mm.
Because the truth is that if you look up to anyone, then you are also looking down on someone. That's how it works. There's no other way. Like you have to make a decision as
There's
to
either a hierarchy or there isn't.
there's
Yeah.
either a hierarchy or there isn't, and you have to decide, which one of those. And there's different times in your life. If you're a kid, maybe there needs to be some structure and hierarchy. But if you're an adult and you want to treat yourself like you're an adult, and you want to go have and make your own life,
Yeah.
you're going to go through some shit, but you're going to have to be able to have the resilience to figure out what's on the other side.
I think it's okay to look up and down. So I think that you don't have to be like, I need to be this person. But if I'm, going back to my childhood and looking up and down, if you will, like I saw the way my parents were living. So I distinctly remember this as I was 18, ready to go off to college on my own, and seeing the struggle that they went through and how they were living. And then in contrast, my aunt and uncle on my dad's side and how they were living. And if I didn't see that
Mm-hmm.
and aspire to that,
Mm-hmm.
I would have been here.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's fluid when I think of it, that in any given moment, somebody may have more knowledge or may have an experience that seems more valid, than mine, somebody who's been through things I haven't. But to keep that fluidity of not putting anybody on a pedestal per
Right,
se, or
right.
not, so that it may not happen, in all the time in every situation, but that you would have an ethos of, I'm not the expert. I can learn from other people
Right, right,
here,
right.
that kind of thing.
That-
But that doesn't mean that we don't have expertise or experience or wisdom that we've gained that wouldn't, in a sense, create a hierarchy, because there's
You need
something
that
to be,
contrast.
yeah.
You need it. Because every little decision that you make has some kind of change or consequence in your life.
Yeah, we talk because we run. I don't know if I shared much, but we bring students together to have civil conversations across different topics. A lot of them are political topics, and we talk about, like, it's not everybody. There's not equality. We strive for equality, but like we don't speak with the same articulation. We haven't had the same barrier. So we try to create an ethos of that rather than like a literal of, and recognize that we can create that through our communication with people, so that they feel that valued when
Yeah.
they walk in the room and they see that sign and they understand,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Well, you just described it really beautifully in that maybe the separation that we need to find, because language is so specific, and using specific language sometimes gives us like an important distinction in the way that we feel about it. But believing that all people are equal it might be different than believing that we should be learning from everyone that we come in contact with. Because like everyone you talk to has something to teach you. They could teach you through some wisdom from their life experience that you want to be able to take in, but they could also be teaching you what you want to avoid.
Yeah, their actions.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't always have to be
I think that the
voice.
one thing
Right,
that we might
correct.
have to consider is just that, like, even if they are a person who has some sort of lived experience and wisdom that we want to gain from, it doesn't mean that they're more important than us.
Right.
No,
And
no,
that-
right,
different
right. That's
thing.
the
Yeah.
difference.
That, I think that
Yeah.
might be the distinction, because it's
Yeah,
the
I like
equal
that.
it's the equal value of our consciousness or of our spirit or of
Mm-hmm.
the fact that we are all alive together,
More
and that there's
worthy than
right.
you.
It's
They're
not
not more
like
valuable than
right.
you.
It's not like my existence is more important than your existence or your
Yes.
existence, but we also couldn't sit around the table and say, if we took a topic that we were all really interested in, we don't have an equal equity in
Right.
what we know about that topic. So it would be in our best interest to listen with as much curiosity as we can, be humble when we don't know something, and be confident when we do. But I think that might have to be separated from equality, because equality is
Yeah, I like that. That was a good way to put it. Are we there?
It's your turn.
yes, we are approaching hour 3 here. So
Stamina.
okay.
Coffee.
The third question is, what do you want your children to believe about the future?
That nothing's set in stone.
Hmm.
That it doesn't have to stay, nothing has to stay the way it is today. That they can make change. And what they do and every second, every moment can affect their lives for better or worse, that they're not stuck. They don't have to be afraid to change. I mean, I was 39, I started a business. I had a divorce when my daughter was 2. Like, you don't have to stay in the same
Your
spot.
son was 2 also, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think probably not even.
Pretty young.
Yeah.
If it doesn't feel good, change.
Mm-hmm. I want them to value relationships in people. I think, and I've learned this recently. It was like kind of like a light bulb moment for me as I was, reading about relationships and thinking about what we do, and that it's also about being in relation. Like here, I don't know either of you very well, but how are you in this world? Relating to people with dignity, and not that, empathy, yes, those things, but that the most important thing are the relationships that we have, and how we go about whatever successes or failures that we're gonna, have to change or we
Yeah.
can change. And yes, we have changed, but I know you all said on your podcast, there's also a lot of unexpected things you couldn't imagine where you are,
Yeah.
today. I didn't grow up wanting to be a professor. I did want to be a mom. I knew that, but the most important thing are those relationships. So even if they end well, those kind of things.
And
But
relationships to themselves, right?
yeah, because I think everything else is ephemeral. So I didn't raise, I don't think, kids that are, like money is the most important thing. I know that we all want it, to be able to do things and things like that. And so, that was important to me. And so I hope that's what they take forward, is that, yes, I want them to have as much success as they can, but it doesn't mean anything if you're alone. So,
You know, over the last year and a half, I recognized that one of the ways that I had failed my kids, in probably the biggest failure I've ever had in my life, was that after I went through my first divorce, which was not only dealing with the emotional roller coaster of getting divorced, but I was also dealing with betrayal, which is a very, very unique thing to get over, because it doesn't just hurt. It makes you not be able to understand how you can build trust with your own intuition again, because I didn't see it coming. And now, like in retrospect and reflection, like, of course I should have seen it coming, you know what I mean? But if you don't, it shakes
because you
that.
trusted, you didn't see it coming,
Yeah.
right? Like if you didn't trust, maybe, but isn't that the reason why you don't see it coming, is because you're doing what you're supposed to be doing? You're trusting.
Well, I would never do this to anyone else, so I didn't think it was possible for it to be done to me.
Yeah.
Naive. That's what it was. I was being naive. And but because I was in a lot of pain, I prioritized making myself feel better by going into relationship faster than I should have, and I wasn't able to prioritize my kids at that moment. And they were also suffering. They were also in a tremendous amount of pain. They had also experienced betrayal, and they deserved better than what I was able to give them in those moments. But you never don't have the opportunity to be able to course correct, and that's the amazing thing about life, right? So I ended up being in another relationship with somebody who I deeply admire. This woman, I think she is brilliant, and she taught me more about. I learned so much from her, but it just wasn't right for my kids.
Right.
And that's the primary value that you start to have to kind of figure out in your life, because if you don't, you can never find peace. You always feel sort of fractured in that way. But over the last year and a half, I decided that if I was going to make that decision, that I was going to learn how to be alone without being lonely.
Yeah.
And I have both come more in touch with what you're saying, that the true value of life is connection. And I've also learned how to bring my life down to very few connections other than with my kids and with the people that I work with, because I knew that I wanted to rebuild connections based off something that was more real, more authentic, more based on who I am today rather than who I perceived myself to be at any other given time. It's all of these things all at once. You know what I mean? It's like, it is that we need to find people to connect with, but we also have to connect with people in a meaningful way. And I find myself going out into the world on a regular basis and being like, I don't know this doesn't look like real connection. This looks like mini performances that everybody's putting on to
Yeah.
be able to walk into this room and walk into that room and play this part and then play this part. And the further you get away from that, the less personally I want it. You know what I mean? I want to walk into a room and be able to take two people who I literally did not know before we started this, but you have intimate conversation and you feel like you build trust and you build an opportunity because of that. That's kind of what I'm hoping for our kids.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That we can just spark like a little bit of a flame somewhere along the way where they start to get in touch with something that feels a lot less performative and a lot more real. Even that word, I don't know how to find truth with them on that anymore. You know what I mean? Because it's like every television show that is pure performance is talking about like, be authentic.
It's so ironic, isn't it?
It's so ironic. He's going to roll his eyes back there, but I have been obsessed with the show Survivor. It's like at the basis of how the way that I think and the way that I do everything. And for the last year, I basically didn't watch television other than watching that. But it is it shows you how people act when they get into a situation that is very uncomfortable. And what you see on that show is that when everybody shows up to the show, it is all performative. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, I'm so happy to be here. And I'm like, I'm gonna lie to everybody. I'm gonna cheat my way through this. And then all of a sudden they sit on a beach with somebody for 2 days and they have an intimate conversation. They're like, oh shit, it doesn't mean the same thing to manipulate this person anymore. Now I know who this person's kids are. Now I know,
Right.
like, they told me something that was real on that beach that, like, now if I do that, like, am I betraying this thing that we built? And you can watch over a season people morph in, from being performative to being real and being performative and being real. But in the end, the only way you can win the show is by having the people that you voted out vote for you to want to win. So it ultimately is about trust. It's not about betrayal.
Interesting.
I hope that we can help our kids figure that out more than we've been able to in our generation, but I am seriously concerned, and I want to be really clear with both of you and anybody who watches this, like, this isn't going to happen on its own. Like, we've been experimenting with what it is to put our kids in front of things that are feeding them information that they don't know how to be bored. They don't know how to be self-reflective without somebody telling them how to do these things. Those aren't the skills of free thinking. Those are the skills of hive minds.
Yeah.
That's a real issue that we've got to address. And we can't be casual about it. We have to be extremely intentional if we want to try to create a world where each of our kids can be the individual, beautiful person that they are. Like, that's what we should be striving for. But I think we've got to do it amongst ourselves before we start trying to preach to our kids that it can be done. Like, we've got to figure out.
Show 'em.
Yeah, we've got to figure out, like, how can you sit down with anybody and be like, listen, thank you for sharing your lived experience. Thank you for sharing your lived experience. Like, I didn't live your experiences, so of course there's a ton to learn.
Yeah.
Like, how many things have you got? I mean, not even to mention that we have different lived experiences. You guys are different genders, you know what I mean, from me. So I have no idea what it would be like to live in this world as a woman and what it would be like to walk into a room and be perceived as a woman instead of a man. I only know what it is to walk into a room and be me.
Yeah.
But I would love to learn more about that. You know what I mean? I would love to understand from your perspective anything that I can, because that opens up my consciousness to understanding people. But how do we give that to our kids? And how do we do it right now when everything is in the state that it's in? Because we are in a state right now.
I appreciate that you brought up the being able to be with yourself too. Like as I mentioned relationships, it made me think about, I wouldn't want the takeaway to be like, you're not good unless you are in. I'm not talking about being in a relationship, but being able to relate to this world, which I think is the goal of this whole thing, right?
But you are right. When you pass, because I had the great fortune of I knew that my mom was going to pass. So I got to sit with somebody for 30 days who I deeply loved and had a huge influence on my life and had a huge influence on who I am. And I got to sit with her for 30 days as she passed. And I've been through enough stuff to know the difference between what is a trauma and what is a gift. And that was a gift. That was a gift that I was given to be able to understand that the cost of love is grief. And that is a cost that you have to be willing to pay at any time that you want to accept love. You don't get it both ways. If you choose to want to be in love with something, you have to pay the ultimate price of how much pain could be on the other side of having to deal with that loss. Which also means that we shouldn't try to be casual about our relationships, because when you build a relationship with somebody and you're willing to invest openly in that person, that's the same thing. You are going to experience some sort of loss when you open yourself up. That's what vulnerability does.
Yeah.
It feels dangerous to do, but it's not unsafe. It's not unsafe to be vulnerable. In fact, I think that that's the great misconception of what's happening right now, is that people are pretending like being vulnerable is dangerous. And the people who seem to be creating that narrative are also the ones who seem to be creating propaganda that is manipulating us into feeling afraid all the time and feeling like everything is dangerous. And it's tricked us into not being vulnerable with one another so that we can realize that we all kind of want the same thing. We want to raise our families. We want to fall in love with people. We want to build a community. We want to, we want to experience prosperity. We want to experience prosperity together.
Yeah.
But I think to do that, we have to figure out, how do we focus on equality of opportunity? How do we create it so that it's not my kids who are advantaged, that all kids have advantage, that all kids have opportunity, all kids have... I don't know. I honestly don't know what the answer to this is, but I do know that I'm worried about it. I'm like legitimately worried that that we as adults, especially in our generation where we had an analog childhood and we're living in a digital adulting, like, we know the difference between those two things. We have to be the answer to, like, we are both the problem and the solution, right?
Yeah.
Like, we know what it was for us to be able to kind of get to know ourselves in the woods. I tried to encourage my kids to do that, and it's happening for my older son, because now he's going to college and he's hiking and he's out in the woods and he's doing that kind of stuff. But they weren't playing manhunt. They weren't, you know what I mean? When they were kids, they weren't experiencing that because everybody was afraid to send their kids into the woods.
So last weekend, my nephews, my twin nephews, they're two 16-year-olds and a 13-year-old, and they came up from Florida. And we went camping, and we went hiking in the White Mountains, and we did a 4,500-foot mountain with my little kids too.
Nice.
And they did it, but that whole weekend they didn't have service on their phones.
Yeah. It's
And
great,
that was
isn't it?
something, and we were climbing, and they just they were noticing things that they hadn't seen before. Like, they're from Florida, so they're like, "Oh my God, a boulder!" But but it was also beautiful to watch my littles just be present.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we've come away from that as adults, but they've never climbed something so high before.
Yeah,
They didn't know when it was going to end. They didn't know how long it was going to take. They didn't know if they were going to make it. They weren't thinking about any of those things. They were just one foot in front of the other, and they just kept going. Meanwhile, I'm like, do we have enough water? How long are they capable of doing this? But I caught myself at some point in that hike and was like, oh my God, my son is taking 2 more steps than I am. because his legs are so little, and he's just like,
Right.
look at that little mushroom over there, Mom, you know,
Love
and being
this.
completely present. So if that's what we can teach our kids to carry with them, is being present and
Yeah.
making situations, like, how can I make a situation better versus worse? Like, every situation you go into, every experience, how can I make it better than it was,
I
right?
love your story. I would take my kids. I'm from Oregon, so big mountains, lots of
Yeah,
rivers and stuff.
yeah.
And every Mother's Day, when we lived there, we didn't move here till 13 years ago. I wanted to go hiking because we just hadn't done as much as I had done in my 20s, and I'm like, oh. And it was awful every year. They fought, they
Yeah.
cried, they wanted to
Aw.
be carried. It was like, and it was only
I
on
make my
Mother's
kids
Day.
do really
I
hard
was
things
very
all the
manipulative.
time, I think.
So I was just like, ah. But they all, like what Kennedy just got back from Glacier. My son went to, on this big Grand Canyon Tetons whole trip, the oldest, and Maddie now is hiking Franconia, and that connection with nature, I think, is so important.
Yeah.
But I just was like, I had no hope when they were young. I love hearing that your kids are like eating this up. But it is so important sometimes, for myself and I think we have to model this for our kids, just to get out,
Do hard things. So, like, I have friends that they don't do hard things
yeah,
with their kids all the time. When,
yeah.
like, and maybe it's the Navy or my husband, but, like, we do hard things. And
they will rise.
They have
my
grit.
kids
My
fought, but
kids
they
have
still
grit.
hiked it. Yeah, but the appreciation might not show up for years in my case. But that feeling of accomplishment of your little guy getting to say that he did that.
He doesn't even know what that means still. Like, he doesn't know how big of a deal that actually is for, like, a 6-year-old to be able to do that.
Limitations, there are limitations in the body, but it's more likely that we're running into limitations of the mind.
Yeah.
Right? So, and kids are the ultimate proof of this, right? That if you set expectations low for a child, then they will only go up to those expectations.
Yep.
But if you raise your expectations, they won't understand that that's not exactly where they should go. Now, there's also the like crazed
Too high,
parents
right,
who are like,
must get all A's and
Right.
be absolutely
Yeah.
perfect. Yeah, that's not
so
just
again,
not.
and the thing,
We're not perfect,
I told
right?
you this when I left, but I said to Kennedy on the way out, I was like, listen, go home and hug your mom. Tell her how much you appreciate her, because she kept telling you your whole childhood, live in moderation, live in moderation, live in moderation. That's what that young man said in the podcast when he was here. My mom taught us how to live in moderation.
I like that.
That balance, right?
Balance.
Balance. Not
Yeah. Yoga. It's all about balance.
however people reach it, right? Yoga, spiritual connection,
Yeah.
hiking in the woods. I think we have to let go of this one size fits all and
Yep.
get into the one size fits one mindset of being able to see each other as being like, hey, listen, if you figured out what works for you, I'd love to know about it in case maybe parts of it could also work for me.
Yeah.
But I'm just mostly grateful that it works for you. That's amazing.
Yeah. Right.
One of the things that you were saying that I was just thinking as you were talking, because I thought what you were saying was really beautiful. Maybe when we watch our children, especially when they're really young, I had an experience where my former wife, her sister, had a baby, and I got to spend a lot of time with this young boy, for like the first 2 years of his life. He lives in Hawaii, so it was like when he would come, I would bring him into the office with me, and I would just hang out with him all day, and he would just, sometimes I'd sit on the floor with him, and we would sometimes I'd be doing work, and he would just be crawling around, and we would just kind of be working together, doing stuff. But it gave me an opportunity to observe him in a version of myself that was way more relaxed than I remember being when my kids were that age. But it was beautiful to see how curious he was. I was not bored at all with this kid. Like, I was really interested in watching everything that he was doing. And it was so interesting to watch him try to think critically about what he was going to do. I mean, the problems weren't all that complex, but he was trying to solve that problem for himself, and it was fascinating. But maybe kids teach us what presence actually is.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? That you don't need to be like multitasking all the time. Maybe you just need to be doing the thing that's captured you in that moment, and you just need to give it your full attention. But what kids can't do is they can't lead. They're not ready for that. We can't expect our kids to lead us towards presence. We can just observe their presence and understand that they deserve us to lead them
Mm-hmm.
in the direction that we're going. And I feel like that might be missing right now in this whole recipe. Not that it's missing around this table, but it just might be missing in general, that we're like, if we want our kids to use their cell phones less, we've got to start using our cell phones less. If
Right.
we want our kids to be, to do hard things, we got to start doing hard things. I've told this story before on the podcast, but right before my son went to school and he went to University of Colorado, I was watching a video, and this video came through on what it, and it was basically telling the story about this connection between cows and buffaloes. Are you?
No, I went to University of Colorado, so I don't know the story though.
Okay.
So I'm like, what is the story? I don't
Okay,
know
so
it.
this story might be interesting to you. It's not actually doesn't have to do
It
with.
was a long time ago. They probably tell different stories.
It doesn't have to do with University of
No.
Colorado specifically, but in Colorado, the buffalo is the mascot for CU Boulder. But the story is this, that buffaloes and cows have this extremely unique connection to each other, which is that both of them have a degree of measuring barometric pressure that no other animal can replicate.
Ooh.
And it's so specific that before we domesticated cows and buffalo, when they were free to roam, that both of them, if there was a storm coming, that they not only had the ability to understand that the storm is coming, many, many animals can do that, including us. But what they could do that was unique is that they could actually tell which direction it was coming from well before the storm could ever appear, as a visual signal in the sky. So what would happen is if a cow would sense that that these senses would go off, they would recognize that a storm was coming and they could tell the direction that it was coming from, they would start running in the opposite direction. And they would all start running in that direction. And they would exhaust all of their stored energy to the point that by the time the storm actually hit them, they just had to weather the storm without any energy at all and completely depleted. Buffaloes have exactly the same ability to be able to measure the barometric pressure, the direction, but they have the opposite reaction. So as soon as they sense where a storm is coming from, they all, as a herd, turn and they run directly into the storm. And they use all of the stored energy that they have to run towards the storm, run through the storm, and then they usually had enough energy to be able to replenish themselves from what had grown from the storm that just passed them.
Meeting the storm.
I think we need to teach our kids to be buffaloes.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to teach them to do hard things, to go on hard hikes, to do things that they think that they can't do, because what we don't want to do is we don't want to put our kids in a situation where we are abusing them. We are putting them in abusive environments. We are doing things that are making them feel like they have to be traumatized for them to then learn lessons from trauma to be able to recover, where we could just teach them how to do really hard things that break them down to the point where they can learn exactly the same lesson that we all had to learn by being traumatized, by just making sure that they go on hikes and they do really difficult things.
Advocate for themselves, speak up.
Yeah.
Those are
Advocate for
hard
themselves.
things.
Yeah, like
Yes.
not. Yeah,
Right?
like telling them to talk to the teacher rather than you talk to the teacher. I mean, I'm sorry I went there. I was just like, that's what I thought when you said that word.
Another quick story. Like something happened at camp actually this week with my daughter, and something is going on with the girls or whatever, and they were a little bit being bullied, and they went to my daughter and they were like, we're too afraid to tell this girl to stop bothering us. But they went to my daughter, and guess who stood up? My daughter stood up, and she was like,
Brava,
you can't
Mom.
do that. That's not right. And I was like,
Love the confidence
it's
of this girl.
happening
But-
all this time.
You know why she did that is because her mom started a business when she was 39, and her mom never stopped being striving for her potential and trying to figure out exactly what's the best version of you because now she wants to emulate that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like we talked about it. I think we might have talked about it before. I apologize if I'm saying something that I've already said
Tickle.
while we came onto the podcast.
Oh, no.
I am 100% convinced that if you want to be, that the only thing that is universal about parenting is that if you want to be a great parent, we all have to figure out how to become the best versions of ourselves and then figure out how to tell our kids how we did it at the age appropriate time. You know, what was it that we learned about being the best version of ourselves in our 20s, in our 30s, in our 40s, in our 50s, in our 60s, and then be patient to allow our kids to catch those times and be able to share from our own lived experience, you know, what would we do differently? What are we proud of what we did? You know, how do we, but we've got to at least level set it for them where if we can see that there's something going on right now that is not in their best interest, we can't continue to participate in it, because what that really is that's the equivalent of what the, you know, almost all of our parents did to us, which is do as I say, not as I do. And every single one of us understands what that really is. It's hypocrisy. And we also reject hypocrisy at the highest level that we can as humans, because we know that it's bullshit.
Yeah.
It's manipulation. It's bullshit. It doesn't actually work. You know what I mean?
I'd want to lob something out here that it is, you know, adjacent to this, but I thought it might come up. The idea of watching your kids fail at something and knowing that they need to, and wanting to protect them, but not wanting them to be traumatized. And I just think that's one of the harder things about parenting, and even knowing what are the appropriate boundaries for that. But I think about this idea of resilience, and if we don't allow them to fail, then where are they going to learn that they're going to be okay on the other side of that?
Yeah,
And
we
I
can't
just
fix everything.
right, and I just wonder how that's played out for you as parents, because you know I've seen my kids suffer disappointments, and it's really heartbreaking. But at times, you know, kind of getting on the other side of it, especially with my oldest and kind of his career path, I feel like those disappointments really created such a resilient, strong-minded, and you know, I'm just really proud of him having gone through those things. And he kind of jokes about it now, like, well, you know, second for this, second for that, so, you know. But yeah, thoughts and experiences around failure and kids, and it's scary, you know.
Yeah, it's scary. Well, I don't try and fix everything for my daughter. And I think I pull from, like, honestly, my human resources experience. Because when even my employees now that come to me when they're complaining about something, or my daughter's complaining about this person, I'm like, oh, well, did you tell them that they disappointed you? And she's like, what? Like, yeah, did you tell them that?
Assertive
Because, like,
communication.
if my husband has this great analogy where, like, a bag of dog shit, right? You see shit, you pick up your dog shit, put it in the bag, and you carry it around, and you smell it, and you're like, you have a choice to, like, throw it away or just continue to sniff it all day long. So you keep sniffing it, you bring it home, you put it next to your bed, on the table, you go to sleep, wake up in the morning, smells like shit, take it down, bring it down to the breakfast table. Now everybody smells the shit, right? When you could have just thrown it away. And I think that a lot of times we carry resentments for way too long. And that's what I tell my kids and my employees, of, like, you just have to address things head on, because a lot of times they're not thinking the same way that you are, and they didn't experience it the same way you did. So you're, like, making up this entire story about what might be going on.
Right.
And they're not even thinking about you at all.
Right,
God,
right.
anybody
At
that's been
all
married
this
knows that you fight with
space.
people in your head all the
All
time.
this space in your brain, all this energy with politics, you know? I'm like, you're just letting that person, like, take up all of this space instead of saying the hard thing, getting it out there, dropping that bag of shit in the trash, and being like, oh, it's not as heavy as I thought it was.
That's going to be a hard thing to get out of my head.
You're welcome.
I think that there's, like, those kinds of things are such simple wisdom, though. You know what I mean? Like, such profoundly simple thing to remember. That's a great analogy that he's using so unbelievably military. You know what I mean? Like
Lots of poop
straight.
I
stories
know
in
I
the
can almost
summary.
like hear the voice. It's
Yeah.
like-
I will say though, from like to your question, which is it's a really great question. I'm still not convinced that there's anything that we can say to our children that makes a difference. I think that it might all just be us waking up every day and being super resilient. Us waking up every day and being like, just focusing on making sure that we are setting an example that they know that when they fall into hard times, they've already seen what somebody does when they are in the shit, when they've gone through something, when they, but both sides, right? Like they know what it looks like to know how to celebrate something when something goes well. They know, we just need to live our best lives
yeah.
and then be extremely conscientious of how much we love our kids and make sure that when we can see that they're going through something that we stop, we talk about everything. We we make them feel like the unique individuals that they are, but we try to lead by example. I
Yeah,
think
because
that
they're
that's
going to pick and choose. They're going to pick and
They
choose
are.
what they learn from us. Like we can't control that no matter
No.
what we do.
That's the hard part about having adult children. Is like you have a role for so long that it is appropriate for you to kind of lead the lesson, so to speak. And then there's a day, and I'll say I still struggle with this, also because my profession is teaching, but like there's a day where it's like, if they're not coming to you on this, it's you don't step in, like you're sending
yeah.
another message to them to say like, I don't believe that you're going to be able to work this out unless I give you my pearls of wisdom.
Yeah.
And so that is a really hard, process of, I had to learn my own, I had to make my own mistakes, learn. And we can tell them our stories and they're going to take some of them and they're going to not take some of them. And I find that, to still be a humbling place for me to kind of just go,
Keep your mouth shut.
yeah, I mean, when your instinct or what you thought your role was, and I mean, I truly just mean the talking and the teaching, not like
yeah.
telling people what to do. Although we did that when they were little, but yeah, and I think I forget sometimes how many stupid things I did or said or thought when I was younger that I realized I'm not that person anymore. I mean, I'm not, fundamentals, but I had learned lessons along the way, and that sometimes you just do learn them, by making the mistake or what what a parent thinks is the mistake.
And they will, whether we want them to or not.
Yeah.
No matter how much we try to avoid it, they're definitely going to learn them. I would just prefer that my kids not learn them in a traumatic way.
Yes.
I would prefer
That's exactly what I was.
that they go through their lumps, that they, that I'm not expecting them to have a life without difficulty. In fact, I would like them to do very difficult things. I would like them to dream really, really big. I'd like them to take on things that they think would be impossible for them to pull off and dedicate themselves completely to trying to do it. That's the kind of hard that I want them to face. I just don't want them to get caught up in a situation where they are traumatized.
Right.
I don't think that it does anybody any good. And very much like violence, violence only creates more violence. There's the possibility that someone could have violence used against them, and they are able to do all of the work necessary to be able to understand that so that they don't feel like they need to perpetuate violence upon the next person. That's possible. It's just very, very difficult. And it's more likely that if you're violent towards somebody, the person who received that violence will find a way to be violent towards someone else. That is the more likely scenario in that. Trauma works almost exactly the same way. It's not a guarantee that if somebody's traumatized by somebody else that they can't do the work to be able to figure out how to not perpetuate the problem. But the more trauma we put out in the world, the more likely it is that we perpetuate more trauma, and that neither of those help anybody, right?
Yeah.
I think we're getting towards the end of the 3 hours. And so I guess what I would love to say on behalf of all of our kids is that I would love for them to be able to live in a world of peace.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that I'm not saying like that we're Pleasantville-ing this, right? Like, because we live in peace in Amesbury, we live in peace in Newburyport, we live in peace in different places, right? There are pockets of peace that we find all the time. People love living in those areas. People love living in environments and in communities where people take care of each other, and that we're kind to one another, and that we're compassionate and we're real with each other. That's what people want.
Mm-hmm.
We just have to be able to acknowledge it. We just got to be able to talk about it openly. We got to be able to, to be able to fight for it with each other, that we're going to move towards figuring out how we maybe drop some of the performance and we start gravitating towards something that feels real and tangible, that we can teach ourselves to become better at, so that our kids have the example of how they can start to get better at it, with the hope that we can make this world just a little bit more peaceful than it was given to us. That was the final thing that was the last thing that my mom said to me in the conversations that I had with her, is that we knew that it was coming to an end. And I asked her, and I was very, very proud of the fact that I had worked my whole life having conversations with people, so that I was ready for this moment to be able to ask her, like, what's the point? And she was very, very clear with me that the point is that you try to figure out how you figure out that your kids are better off than you. She was very clear that there is nothing else that matters. That everything else is stuff that comes and goes. It goes up and down. You think you think you are profoundly committed to something, and you have a death of your identity, and then you don't know how you feel anymore, and all of those things go up and down. But what never ever changes is that things get better as the generation beneath you does better. Maybe that's what we can just
Your
keep.
wise mother.
She was. I was very grateful. I was very grateful for that, but I don't think she's saying anything that we don't all agree.
Yeah.
She nails it, because I think the opposite of that, the pain of not having your children experience maybe the joys that you've had, not the same things, but to have peace. That pains me, to think that they have to think about things or worry about things or confront things that we didn't have to. And that, so your mom sums it right up there. That's what we want for our children.
Yeah, and the reason why they don't have it is not because the world's not capable of it. It's because we continue to accept bad behavior and pretend like that's become normalized. And like, there's just no world that we can live in anymore where bombs kill children that are built by people who make money by those bombs. Like, come on, fuck that.
Right.
We've got to be done with this, right? Like, every person that I know that's a decent person understands that is not something that we cannot continue to be cool with it being this way. So I don't know what the solution is. I know that it cannot involve violence. I know that it has to be 100% peaceful. Otherwise, it's not going to work anyways. But I do know that that our kids deserve that. And I know that I'm very, very grateful to the two of you for taking this container of 3 hours of time and giving your full attention to each other in a way that allows us to be able to have the start of conversations that I hope turn into opportunity for more, right? Just that the work that you're doing with your students at UNH is unbelievable. To get young people talking like this, to be able to share their thoughts and to be promoting critical thinking that could turn into free thinking. That's what our kids deserve. Our kids deserve to be able to think for themselves. They do not need to be infiltrated by somebody else telling them how they should perceive themselves. They should not be looking for someone else to tell them that they're enough. They're enough. They're alive. They're beautiful.
Right.
Like, we've got to completely reestablish how we take ownership of the way that we do that, and I think it's possible. But I think it starts with these kinds of conversations, and I really appreciate the both of you for making the investment.
Thank you.
I know. I loved hearing the stories, and you've given me a great gift in having my son on and being able to hear him talk. I mean, that's just been really special. But I think it's interesting that everyone around this table is actually involved in some kind of life's work that is about giving to people or trying to find some better version of ourselves.
Find peace.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I do think that
like we have this innate desire to do this,
our goal with the podcast is simply to be an antenna for curiosity. So in the beginning, it's been hard to get people to come in and sit around this table because it's new and it's like, and we were really surprised. We first started trying to do a community conversation with that larger table out there where we could just get people to come in and talk.
Yeah.
No one showed up.
Oh, wow.
No one. The only person that showed up was Oliver. He found a purple
And now
envelope.
it's a job.
Exactly right. And it turned into a great relationship and somebody who I'm really grateful as a part of what we're doing. But I think that something is happening in the world right now, and I think that curiosity is going to be hopefully one of the antidotes, because it is certainly it is the exact opposite of the problem potentially.
It's really interesting. I'm sorry, like I know the conversation has to end, but I think it's so interesting in this moment that you are doing this and that curiosity is really core to this. We're also living in a moment where there's so many people where it's not curiosity, it's expertise, it's TikTok, it's my channel, my Instagram. Like there's so many people who are telling everybody else how to live, and it's the exact opposite in my mind of how you enact curiosity. And yet this project, this program, this goal, vision is an antidote to that. In the moment we're living in, it feels like it's needed more than ever.
One of the things that we talk about all the time, Oliver and I talk about this, but our entire team talks about this all the time, is that the solution is always embedded in the problem. And our goal always needs to be to ask the right questions about what the problem is, because it completely exposes what the solution is.
Right.
And so if you look at why we feel the way that we feel about what's happening to us right now, it seems to be all based on authority.
Mhm.
And when you look at what the opposite of authority is, it seems to be curiosity. And
Yeah.
that is the genesis of why this all exists, is because, and then I think that I had the understanding, because I had been doing training for so long, that I understood that none of this could work if my ego was involved in it. And that I also understood that as a trainer and somebody who had done facilitation for a long time, that there was a part of my ego that deeply wanted to be some sort of, everything that you just described, but that was the antithesis of what was actually going to work. And so it just inspired me to try to figure out, like, what could something like this look like if we tried to remove as much ego from it as we possibly could, and just try to present something that was raw, that had nothing to do with anyone, which led us to build our own LLM, to create a game that we believe has no authority to it, to create what we hope will be an opportunity for people to be a part of a community that doesn't have anyone who is trying to define anything, that we are going to define that together, that we've got to figure out how we build something and build it in an economy that's based on personal growth, not an economy that's based on personal wealth.
Yeah.
But who knows?
Only the weight of the shoulders, or the weight of the world on your shoulders. So, well,
Okay.
thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
It's an absolute pleasure. We can, that's a wrap on the Unscripted room for this
Yeah, yeah.
episode.